Genevieve? Great, thank you. So we're calling this meeting of the Montana State Library Commission to order. Today is October 13. And let's start with some introductions. My name is Ken Arlich. I'm the chair of the State Library Commission. And Bruce, why don't we go to you next?
Bruce Newell, member appointed by the governor here in Helena.
Thank you. Elsie?
The superintendent will be right in. She's just finishing up another meeting real quick.
Okay, let's go to Peggy.
Good morning. I'm here in Whitefish with our lovely, not very good internet again. So video off, but ready to go.
Thank you, Peggy. And Kristen?
Kristen Kerr in Helena, Montana, and part of the commission.
Excellent, thank you. Robin? Robin, are you available?
I think she is muted.
Sorry, I'm talking. I was
There we
talking. I'm Robin Scribner. I'm also from Geraldine, Montana. I'm a library commissioner also.
Great, thank you. And don't see Dalton on the list. Dalton, are you here? Okay. Why don't we go then to Jenny?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenny Stapp, the state librarian. Glad to be with you.
Okay. And do we want to introduce other members of the library staff as well?
Yes.
Yes, Melissa? Melissa, you're unmuted, but we're still not hearing you.
How about now?
That's great.
Aha. Okay, sorry about that. I'm Melissa Briggs and I'm the Central Services Manager at the State Library.
Okay, thank you. Evan?
Evan Hammer, Digital Library Administrator at the Montana State Library.
Thank you. Tracy?
Lead Consulting and Learning Librarian, Montana State Library.
Okay. Kara?
Good morning, Kara Orban, Statewide Projects Librarian, Montana State Library.
Thank you. Bryce?
Good morning, everyone. Bryce Maxwell. I'm the program coordinator at the Montana Natural Heritage Program.
Okay. Pam?
Oh, Pam Henley, one of the consulting librarians with the State Library.
Thank you. Sharon?
Good morning. I'm Sharon Hardwick. I'm a human resource specialist for the State Library.
Genevieve?
Genevieve Lighthizer, admin specialist with the State Library.
Jenny, help me out here. Who else needs introduction? Jennifer Burnell.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Burnell. I'm the Montana Memory Project Director for the State Library.
And
Jennifer.
Ashley, Ashley Kandich.
Thank you. Ashley?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ashley. I'm the staff accountant for the state library.
Great. Anyone else who needs introduction?
This is Melody Carley. I'm one of the Montana Shared Catalog Library System Administrators.
Great, thank you, Melody. Anyone I've missed?
Amy Marchwick, also a Montana Shared Catalog System Administrator.
And Jenny, do we need to introduce our guests?
I think we should.
Okay. Bill?
I'm Bill Wilson, and I'm here with Quality Metrics. We're performing the 5-year LSTA evaluation, and we'll tell you more about that a little later.
Okay. And Carson?
Hi, I'm Carson Block. I'm a library technology consultant and assisting with the LSTA evaluation, specifically with the network project and continued awesome implications of that. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else who needs introduction?
Good morning, Kenning. This is Molly Krukenberg. I'm here with the Montana Historical Society, and we're going to be presenting a little later this morning on the Sensory Trail Partnership. That's a potential with the Montana Heritage Center. We'll likely have a couple other folks joining us later in the meeting, and I'll introduce them then.
Great. Thank you so much, Molly.
Thanks, Kenny.
And I'm not just sweating my role here as the new chair, but it's actually 78 degrees here in my office. So
Oh, goodness.
this is what happens when they first turn on the heat in the fall. Okay, so let's move into our agenda. We have staff longevity recognition. Evan Hammer and Carol Churchill. Jenny, I assume you're taking this?
I'll take the lead, yes. And it really is an honor with some of these longer term employees. I'm going to recognize Evan Hammer for his 15 years with the state of Montana. He was first hired as the DNRC GIS coordinator. I believe he was the first GIS coordinator that DNRC had back in 2006. And we got to know and work with him through various programs of the state library, including the ESRI Enterprise License Agreement team. And after some longtime staff retirements, our Natural Resource Information System Manager position was open in about 2009, 8-9. And someone said to me, I really think you need to talk to Evan about applying for that position. And I didn't know him well at all at the time, but we had coffee together and talked about the nature of the work and the position. And he did go ahead and apply and interview. And we finally made him an offer in early December. And it took him at least 3 weeks to accept our offer. And it was at that point in time, I realized that Evan is not one to be rushed. We sort of talked about this when we met with Kristen and Robin the first time. I'm kind of a jump off the dock kind of person. I make decisions quickly. Hopefully they're usually for the best, but Evan is definitely a dip the toe in the water and get in gradually kind of person. And I think we balance each other well in that regard. Evan has always been just an incredibly enthusiastic supporter of the work of the state library and the mission of the state library. He understands well our role in making sure that not only are we collecting and managing data and information, but that we do it so that Montanans have access to the information they need to influence their lives. And it's always with that mission in mind. The other thing I want you to know about Evan is that he has the most care and concern with regard to the staff. He is always mindful of any decision and how those decisions will impact the staff directly, and he brings those concerns to us often to make sure that we're keeping our foremost asset, our staff, in mind. And I appreciate that about him so much as well. He's always willing to try new things, to experiment, to test, to think about what new service models might look like, always with the idea of trying to better the organization and better our services to Montanans. So I'm just so grateful that after 3 weeks back in about 2009, he decided to join our team. So Evan, thank you so much.
That's a great way of honoring Evan. Jenny, thanks very much for that lovely summary. Congratulations, Evan. I have to say, I didn't even know there were satellites in 2006 when you were working on GIS. Just kidding. Anything you'd like to say?
Mostly just thank you, Jenny, for the kind words, and just really appreciative of the state, DNRC for giving me the chance out here. And then of course, Jenny and the State Library for the opportunities since I've come over here. Really appreciate the support. And I was going to try to come up with some good little story, because I like to tell little stories, but then I saw that Carol's on here for a 30-year. I'd much rather hear about Carol. And I'm just honored to be part of this ceremony. 30 years is awesome. So let's get to her.
Well, congratulations, Evan. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jenny, back to you.
I'm going to turn things over to Melissa.
Okay.
Yes. So I am so happy to honor Carol for 30 impressive years at the state. Carol, so when I first started here several years ago, our central services admin team looked very different, and it was just me and Carol. And so my eyes were wide open and I was scared to death. And Carol was there for me. And every time I had a question, Carol didn't, it's above her pay grade, Carol, but she sat down with me and she helped me through every issue that we ever had. And so that's one of the things that I love most about Carol is that she's inquisitive and that she wants to learn more, and that she's willing, even if she doesn't know the answer, to sit down with me and help figure out what the problem is or how to fix it. With her years and years of knowledge, she may not know the answer right off the bat, but chances are she's done something that affected or had to do with that issue over the course of her career. And so I just can't tell you how much I value that in an employee, and Carol never fails. Every time there's an issue, she's our go-to person in the agency. She's clearly been here the longest. And so she's our go-to, and I just appreciate her so much. I also want to mention that, Carol's been here many, many years, and she has a process, and her process works, and we don't need to mess with the process. But the pandemic happened, and so the process had to be completely changed overnight. Literally, everything needed to be electronic. And I'm just so impressed with how Carol took on that challenge, and she overhauled her entire process that she's been doing for 30 years and changed it. And we worked out the kinks. There were obviously issues or things that came up that we weren't aware of. I just could sleep so well at night knowing that Carol was on it. And I'm just so proud of how that process has changed. And she still continues to improve it. And if an issue comes up, she comes to me with a solution for it. And so I value her and treasure her so much. And I'm so happy that she's here with us at the State Library. I also wanted to mention that you all on the commission, you don't get to see Carol and work with her every day like I do. And you don't see her at legislative hearings. She's not necessarily the face of the State Library, but because she does her work so well, we are able to do our jobs. And that is just as important as being the face or presenting at a legislative hearing. And I just can't thank her enough for being such a reliable person, an inquisitive person, somebody that I laugh and joke with, and I call my friend too. She's just made my life so much happier, and I'm so glad that I get to work with you, Carol, and congratulations on 30 marvelous years. You've done a wonderful job, and we thank you for all that you've done to help stand up the State Library.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
It's wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. I think it looks like Bruce maybe wants to say something as well.
Well, if I may, I'd like to thank both Evan and Carol, but in particular, I would like to say to Carol that I've known you for a long time and worked with you a long time, and you have really been such a great partner, I think, to me, but such a great asset for the State Library. You are reliably graceful and kind of unstintingly cheerful. And as someone else mentioned, you're always on an even keel. And you have brightened my days more times than I can say. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate it. That's nice to hear.
Thanks, Bruce. Carol, is there anything that you would like to add?
Nope, just that the State Library is a great place to work.
can see that. And you two are part of an incredible team that's doing such amazing work on so many fronts. So thank you very much, both of you, for your service. Okay. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Bruce, you might want to lower your hand, otherwise I'll keep calling on you. Jenny, can we take this consent agenda as one item, or do we need to approve these individually?
You can take it as one item unless any of the commissioners want to pull out any item from the consent agenda.
Okay, so these are all issues that we have dealt with in previous meetings. So does anybody have any comment or would like to say anything about these items?
To begin with, I move adoption of the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Kristen. Any further discussion? Okay, then all commissioners in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the consent agenda is adopted or approved. Thank you. Let's move on now. Jenny, resolution honoring Cindy Kristen.
Yes, thank you. It's my privilege to present this resolution honoring a longtime librarian from the Montana community who retired in August. Cindy was the Children's Services Librarian for the Bozeman Public Library for many, many years. And her influence and mark can be felt throughout all of Montana's libraries who offer children and early learning services in the state of Montana. For those of you who are not aware, we have on staff Amelia Kim, who serves as our lifelong learning librarian, and we strive to help libraries support services for Montanans from birth to death. And that's a huge job. That's just an amazingly large job. And so it's certainly far more than we could take on with the staff that we have. And so the state library really relied on Cindy for many, many years to help us envision and design, deliver, and support a program for early literacy and children's services for the state of Montana. She worked with our previous lifelong learning librarian, Sarah Groves, to create the Ready to Read Montana program. And she brought, through her knowledge and experience, an understanding of the challenges that Montana libraries faced in offering early literacy services, especially services for kiddos from birth to age 3. And she helped us think about how we could overcome those barriers by making sure that we were offering professional development opportunities for libraries to build and grow their collections of books for that age group, opportunities for libraries to rethink their space so that they had the space to allow children to run around and play and have experiential learning kinds of opportunities. And with her influence, the number of Montana libraries offering early literacy services grew from fewer than 5 to nearly 80 of Montana's 82 libraries offering a regular early literacy program.
Thank you, Jenny. Are you still there? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you blanked out for a few seconds.
Yep, my internet just dropped, so it looks like I'm back. I was saying we don't always honor librarians in this way, but when someone has made this kind of mark, we think it's appropriate for the State Library Commission to honor and recognize them. And in this case, it's truly deserving, and it's my privilege to bring this resolution to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for this resolution. I would entertain a motion from the commission to approve the resolution.
I make the motion.
Thank you, Robin. Second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Peg. That was Peggy, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Peggy. Any further discussion or comment about this resolution?
I'd like to say thank you to Cindy. And how wonderful it is that she's worked so hard on children's literacy and introducing books to children. That's quite a passion of mine.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you. Elsie, did you have something that you wanted to add? Heard your voice there for a moment. Elsie, are you with us? Okay, any other comment?
I'd just like to agree with everything that's been said. I mean, Cindy has been a fabulous librarian for the people that she served in Bozeman, but has also done a lot to kind of catapult the children's services and early learning, and in a kind of a mature view of that, a kind of developed view of that for a long time. She's been the state leader, and I just applaud the good work she's done.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, all in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. The resolution passes. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you all.
Okay, now we will move into to Bill and Carson, who are here representing Quality Metrics, and they will be working with the State Library on the 5-year evaluation of the Library Services and Technology Act contract. So, Jenny, is there any further introduction of this topic that you'd like to make?
Not necessarily, except to say that we do go through this evaluation every 5 years. The Institute of Museum and Library Services, which is our federal funder for the Library Services and Technology Act funds, requires that we do a 5-year evaluation and that we create a 5-year plan. And part of that process involves required evaluation from an independent evaluator. And this summer, the State Library contracted with Quality Metrics to do that work. And I'm really looking forward to them being able to share some information with you.
Thank you. Okay, Bill and Carson.
All right, thank you very much. I have to say that the long in the tooth kind of comment made me feel as if I should introduce myself as being the long in the tooth library consultant. I'm here representing Quality Metrics. Quality Metrics is a library consulting firm. We'll give you a little more information as we go along. But I've been working as a library consultant for about 30 years. Actually did a project for the Montana State Library. I went back and looked in my files, and I was with you and Helena about 20 years ago for a project that we did at that point in time when I was working in an independent firm called Himmel and Wilson. For the last 5 years, I've been working with Quality Metrics. Normally, Martha Kiralidu, who is the president and chief consultant for Quality Metrics, would be with you. She is actually in the air coming from Alaska. We're also doing the evaluation for the Alaska State Library, and was up there meeting with library directors in Juneau, and ended up being delayed by a whole day in her flight home. So I'm pinch hitting today. With me is Carson Block. Carson is also part of our team. and someone that many of you in Montana know from his recent work in Montana. I've worked with Carson for more than 10 years now on a variety of projects in a variety of different places. So Carson is a good match for quality metrics, and we often use Carson's skills in the area of technology. I'd like to present some basic information. Some of this may be pretty repetitive for those of you who've been on the commission for a while, but we wanted to provide everybody with some baseline information. What we're talking about is the Library Services and Technology Act, and we're specifically going to be talking about the Grants to States program. Library Services and Technology Act has got a number of different portions to it. There are leadership grants and a variety of different grants, but the Grants to States program is a program that is the largest ongoing source of federal funding for library services. So if it's federal funds for libraries that you're talking about, until very recently with the CARES Act and ARPA funds, this has been the major source of dollars, federal dollars that flow to the states. Program actually dates back to 1956. 1956, there was something called the Library Services Act. The Library Services Act was aimed primarily at trying to get library services to rural residents who had no access to libraries, often because the citizens weren't located in municipalities that have libraries. Over time, that morphed into something called the Library Services and Construction Act, and that continued on into the 1990s, at which point the Library Services and Technology Act replaced it. One of the big changes at that point was no funds were allowed for construction purposes, and an emphasis changed toward services that involved technology. There's about $150 million per year that is distributed to the states. The distribution is made based on a formula that treats both population and a basic grant for small population states. Montana actually benefits a bit from being a low population state on one side in that basic grant that goes to low population states. Obviously, with low population comes fewer dollars on the population side of the formula. And so large population states like California and Texas receive a lot more money. However, if you look at it on a per capita basis, Montana would receive more than those states. The dollars are sent to states through state library administrative agencies, and each state has to identify a state library administrative agency. In the case of Montana, that's the Montana State Library. Montana's allotment is about $1.2 million per year, and that works out to being about $1.06 per capita. Obviously, $1.06 per capita is not enough money to provide library services for anywhere or any place. It really is a small amount of money that hopefully can be invested and leveraged to gain greater services and to provide kind of an outsized benefit for a relatively small amount of money. Every 5 years, the state library administrative agencies have to submit a plan outlining how they're going to spend their money. Those dollars have to be consistent with the purposes and priorities of the LSTA program as are spelled out in federal legislation. That said, the states do have a pretty wide amount of latitude in determining how they're going to spend their dollars. There are specific regulations and limits on how dollars can be spent. Can't spend money on construction, as I mentioned. Obviously, can't spend money on lobbying. However, beyond those constraints, states and state library administrative agencies like the Montana State Library do have the opportunity to kind of take a look at the needs that exist in their state and to craft their Library Services and Technology Act plan to be responsive to those kinds of needs. To be able to continue to qualify for the program every 5 years, as Jenny mentioned, there needs to be an independent assessment of the progress that's been made in meeting the goals that are in the plan. That assessment is due on March 30th of 2022, and Quality Metrics has been chosen as the evaluator to conduct this round of LSTA evaluations. The other item on the calendar that you should be aware of is that a new 5-year plan for the federal fiscal years 2023 through 2027 is due in June of 2022. That means that if you want to incorporate the results of the evaluation into the new plan, which is obviously a good idea, you need to kind of start early. And in fact, Montana has chosen to do that, to start the process of evaluation in such a fashion that you'll really be able to digest the evaluation information prior to working on your 2023 to 2027 plan. There is something that's very odd about the evaluation and the schedule that's laid out by the feds for this program. That is that while this is called a 5-year evaluation, it takes place when only 3 years have passed of the 5-year period. So we're doing a 5-year evaluation with essentially 3 years worth of data. That means that we have to kind of take a look at where you are, and we have to sort of project and take a look at the trajectory of the work that you're doing to really determine whether or not you're meeting the goals, whether you're partially achieving the goals or not achieving those goals. And basically what's required of us as the independent evaluators is to look at that goal level and to determine whether or not you're achieving, not achieving, or partially achieving the goals. It's a particularly interesting challenge this time around, given the COVID year that, or COVID year and a half that we've been experiencing, in that there are some programs and some projects that either have not happened or that are happening in ways that are very much unlike what was intended when they were originally designed. And we need to factor that in as well. Part of the good news, I think, is that in some cases, COVID has spurred us to do some things in different ways that in fact are new methods that may continue well beyond the pandemic period of time. And individual libraries are implementing services such as curbside delivery and virtual story hours, things like that, that they weren't doing prior to the pandemic that may in fact in some places continue well beyond because they've shown that they can be effective and a real service to end users. Over the next few months, Quality Metrics and our team will be interacting with the Montana State Library staff and with the Montana the Montana Library community to find out how the LSTA funds have been able to support both major programs and smaller grant programs that go to libraries that have impacted services in the state. When you get down to the bottom line, what these dollars are about is impacting the services that are received by the residents of a state. In our evaluation, to the degree possible, we're going to be drilling down to interact with some end users. That's easier in some programs than in other programs, but to give you some examples, we think that we'll be successful in talking to some of the users of the Montana Talking Book program. That's one that is supported pretty heavily with Library Services and Technology Act funds. Another program where we hope to be getting some real input from end users is the Montana Memory Project. Again, one that is designed to impact the user that is the primary target of library services in the staff or in the state. We've started our process already and have had multiple conversations with both groups of the state library staff and with individuals on the Montana State Library staff to both gather statistics and to gather some of the more detailed information about the projects that are being undertaken with LSTA funding. This is our team for the Montana evaluation. And there you get to see Martha. She's probably looking more tired than that right now on her flight from Anchorage. But Martha's offices are located in Silver Spring, Maryland. For many years prior to starting Quality Metrics, Martha worked for the Association of Research Libraries for about 20 years as their primary researcher. Martha brings a PhD in library science, as well as a couple of other master's degrees from notable universities. Carson has his own company, Carson Block Associates, and Carson is a well-known library technology consultant and has public library experience and has been doing consulting for a number of years. 5 years ago, I worked with Carson on a couple of LSTA evaluations. We did evaluations in Idaho and Oklahoma at that point in time. And over the past 30 years that I've been involved in consulting, I've been involved in more than 50 LSTA evaluations and multiple LSTA plans. So we have a very experienced team that's going to be working with you. Here's our process very, very briefly. We've been kind of in the discovery process. The discovery process continues throughout from beginning to end. But digging into the basics of information. Each of the state library administrative agencies does report to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which is the federal agency that oversees this program. The states report on an annual basis to IMLS in something that's called the State Program Report. And so one of our baseline areas where we start to dig in is taking a look at those reports. In addition, there's interaction with the State Library Agency and IMLS on an ongoing basis through program officers at IMLS that are assigned to the state libraries. And we work with them as well to gather additional information. On specific programs, we uncover some information from some additional sources. For example, the Talking Book Program reports annually to the Library of Congress, which is the home for the NLS, National Library Service Program, for the blind and print disabled. And we're able to get some statistics and some information from them as well. So we attempt to try to glean some information so that we're not burdening staff with asking questions that they've already answered in other places. So we're heavy into that systematic data collection portion of our project right now. In fact, we're starting to go down the path of the data analysis. I mentioned the NLS data on Talking Books. We're already digging into that and analyzing some of that, already digging in and analyzing some of the state program report information. So we're kind of in between that systematic data collection and data analysis portion right now. Once we've are well down the path on the data analysis, then we start to synthesize some of that information. We like to know to kind of put out there that we hope that none of our clients end up being surprised by our reports. So there's an ongoing conversation, and we have regularly scheduled meetings with Jenny and her key staff to kind of report on where we are. One of the other steps that we're doing is we conducted kind of a self-evaluation or an internal evaluation to gather information on how the staff thinks they're doing on achieving those LSTA goals, so that if there's any disconnect between our analysis and what we're finding and what the staff is finding, that we can talk about that and find out why there is any disagreement. Right now, things are tracking just fine, and we're not finding those kinds of things. I guess I'd make one other comment. Over the years, I've been involved with projects in over 30 of the state library agencies. And you can usually tell pretty early on what the corporate culture is of a state library agency. And you're able to detect agencies where there's some tension or some disagreement, and those that are highly collegial and places where the staff is kind of acting in concert. And it's been a pleasure working with Montana. And I think commissioners saw sort of an illustration of that this morning as far as the sense of collegiality that exists with the Montana State Library staff. I don't think that anyone was stretching the bounds of reality to say it's a good place to work when one of your longtime employees mentioned that, and the smiles and enthusiasm come through as well. So we're delighted to be working with you. The reporting process of this report will begin not too far down the line here. We're limited in what we submit to IMLS to a 25-page report. Now, it can be longer than that when you include appendices and So much of the data that is gathered in tables and interview schedules and surveys, those kinds of things, will be contained in the appendices to the report. But the base report is going to be about 25 pages, and there's a 5-page summary as well, so that for purposes of the commission, when the report comes along, there's going to be about a 5-page executive summary that you're going to be able to look at and kind of see how we're reporting on your progress towards the LSTA plan. And then there's that longer 25-page version that you'll be able to look at. Quality Metrics is a library-centered firm. We work almost exclusively with libraries and organizations that support libraries. I want to thank you for your time this morning. We're going to want to carry on a little bit of a conversation with you. At this point, I'd like to kind of let Carson talk just a little bit about some of his role in interacting with us and kind of taking a closer look at some of the programs that are offered. I'm going to stop my screen sharing here so we can take a look at each other. And Carson, turn it over to you for a moment.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate that. And it's so good to be with you all because, of course, Montana is like the state that took the ball on the Towards Gigabit Libraries Toolkit. And just a little bit of a background. I'm the project manager for a project funded by a related governmental institution, but it's the IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And a few years ago now, we got a Laura Bush grant to create an audacious goal, which is a self-guided toolkit to diagnosing connectivity problems that small and tribal libraries face. Audacious goal, right? It works. that's the end of the long story. And we of course published this as open source, and we wanted to encourage the use and distribution. And Montana is a rock star in taking that toolkit and applying it and taking it even further. So stepping outside of my role here today, I want to just say for a moment, thank you very much for this, because this is why we did it. We wanted to get these tools in folks' hands. Now, of course, we have a second round of grant funding, and Suzanne Raymer of the State Library is on our advisory board, where we're expanding the reach of this toolkit throughout the country. In the meantime, though, this is like my bailiwick. Creating the access that we need through our institutions is so important to our community. COVID brought this to a head, but frankly, it was important before. It just wasn't important to everybody. It wasn't on their radar. Now it is. So your moves to start diagnosing your issues that you have in Montana, good timing and good work. For the purposes, though, of our LSTA evaluation, yes, I'm joined together with Bill again. It's so nice to be hanging out. Bill was like from the get-go a mentor for me in consulting, and continues to do that, even though I know that Bill's, he's trying to do different things. He's done a lot of great things, but he's always there and always available. And it's so nice to work with Martha on this project. And as well, my office is working on 3 other LSTA evaluations that are we're doing the whole thing. So it's actually very nice to just have a very targeted sense of working specifically on a project in Montana that I'm so familiar with, and not be responsible for the kit and caboodle. So this is so wonderful. The project that's getting my primary attention, and I'll be meeting with the Montana Network Advisory Council in about a week and a half, I think, not next week, but the week after, is the E-rate consultation and internet speed improvement. And again, that was where Montana took the ball, collected a lot of data in the field in terms of the actual performance of broadband connections, as well as the age of end user equipment. There was a consultant who performed that tabulation for you, and then that work in terms, our next was analyzed by Simmons University, Colin Rhinesmith, Joe and Susan, wonderful folks. I've got to work with them on other projects as well. But they created a very good report, in my opinion, of that data so that it was understandable. It's hard to look at a chart of download speeds, for instance, and say, well, I don't know if that's good or bad. How am I to know? So what I see as coming forward in my evaluation of the E-rate consultation and internet speed improvement, I of course want to know what has happened since this. I know that that there is some broadband investment coming from the state level, and I want to understand a little bit better any relationship there might be between the needs assessment that you showed and spurring that. And also I've got a lot of other questions in terms of the things that have been happening behind the scenes for you. In order to evaluate the program. Also, as a bonus, this work in terms of broadband for small, rural, and tribal libraries is my heart and soul. And so, as we're talking, I'll of course make recommendations for your next round of LSTA funding in terms of technology. But I think we're going to have some very nitty-gritty discussions, and I'll be very eager to share things that I've learned working with other states and just working directly in these areas. But again, it is so awesome to be able to check in with you on this program, and I'm just so pleased to be here.
And Carson, of course, is coming to you from the exurbs of Montana. Carson is located in Colorado, and of course, I think Wyoming is the suburbs of Montana, and Colorado must be the exurbs of
That's right.
of Montana. It's a part of the country that both of us, enjoy immensely. Let me give you just a little bit more background into how you're spending your money currently. And I'd like to chat just a little bit with you about some of your perceptions on both looking back, and we're kind of looking back by about 3 years, as I mentioned, and then looking forward, looking into that next 5-year period of time. I also mentioned that this is a relatively small amount of money, but it's a powerful amount of money. One of the first steps that we take is a follow the money kind of a thing. We look at where the larger portions of dollars go. But we also find when we're evaluating LSTA programs that sometimes smaller investments have a greater return on investment. One thing that you can certainly share with us or share through Jenny, however you want to do it, is if there are anecdotes that come from your own libraries or your own communities of the impact that has happened, we'd like to hear about those things. Kind of our favorite anecdote so far, and we've been telling it to all kinds of other states, is the anecdote about the hotspots that have been provided by through the Montana State Library through LSTA dollars, and a particular hotspot that was used by a minister in a rural area to conduct a funeral and allow the loved ones of a family to participate in that closure and in that funeral. So sometimes a very small investment, if you think about a hotspot, a relatively low dollar amount, think about the impact and the value to the end users and the multiple end users that were able to experience that closure in their life for a loved one. If we do follow the dollars, though, then that's an important aspect here. The single largest amount of dollars spent in Montana of LSTA dollars is in the consulting area. it and the information access area, which includes the shared catalog and delivery portions, cataloging support pieces, are about equal, and each of them are over 20% of the LSTA dollars. They account for almost half of the LSTA expenditures when you're done with it. The Talking Book Library is heavily supported by LSTA dollars, another roughly 20% of the dollars. About 10% of the money goes towards continuing education, staff development purposes. And that may be a little misleading. It may actually be a larger amount than that because there are lots of staff development, staff training aspects of the consulting role as well. So, kind of think of that as a combined version, that consulting work adds to the staff development portion as well. And then the other one that is a fair amount of money is the Montana Memory Project, a little less than 10% of the dollars over the last few years have been spent in that area. Together, those programs or those projects that I mentioned account for a little over 85% of the dollars. The balance is spent on some efforts that are smaller in dollar amounts, things like lifelong learning efforts, but a variety of smaller, not less important necessarily, efforts that the State Library is making. Why don't we do that look back for a moment, think about those areas, the consulting staff development portion, that effort to provide some equity in terms of the level of professionalism that's available to residents in regardless of the size of community. That Talking Book service, the services that are offered to the blind and print disabled. I would mention that there's been a change in that program nationally. It used to be heavily oriented towards people with visual disabilities. At this point, the program is now open to people with a variety of reading disabilities as well. So dyslexia qualifies for the Talking Book program, a variety of other disabling conditions or use of print disabling conditions would apply. And then the Montana Memory Project, which is a real favorite of mine. I happen to be kind of a history buff, and I've enjoyed just digging around in Montana memory a little bit to take a look at some of the resources that exist there. I invite you to kind of unmute yourself and talk about the impacts that you've seen of any of these programs. Anybody like to speak to any of them? You can also use chat if you'd like, but Bruce, I saw you're unmute there. Would you like to comment?
Well, no. Well, yes. Yeah, I mean, clearly, you made the comment that sometimes you didn't phrase it quite like this, but sometimes underfunded programs do the most work, by being forced perhaps to be lean and mean and make things happen. And I think that's true. I think in Montana, and I suspect that this is true in most states, that in Montana, one of our biggest challenges is getting a sufficient level of library services out to everyone in the state. And that's sort of a rural versus urban, if urban is the proper word, problem. But it's also, there are inequities in communities, large communities as well. And LSCA, now LSTA, has always been a really valuable program and always done really good things, and sort of given states an opportunity, given Montana an opportunity to do lots more than it would be able to do on state funding. But these funds are really still insufficient for the needs. And I guess I still hold hope for COSLA or someone to be able to campaign and bring in the amount of money that allows us to help states truly meet the needs of everyone in the state. And in Montana, the easy places to point to that are, of course, the tribal governments and residents on tribal land, but also the parts of the state that are a long ways from adequate fiber, or a long ways from having the funds to provide access that fiber or something else will give them in a meaningful kind of way. So, I love LSTA stuff. I think it's terrific that that the state library here is climbing on the bandwagon sooner than later, so we can work it into our planning. In the past, I think sometimes the actual planning for actual programs at the state library has not meshed well with the LSTA planning, and I think that makes the LSTA planning sort of just an exercise. I really applaud the progress we've made to be able to integrate this and use the LSTA planning and also feedback in a useful way to take and help us do a better job. Sorry, I could blab on forever, so I won't. But I think we're really fortunate to have these funds, and we're fortunate to have this planning and evaluation process. And what I want is a better coordinated planning and evaluation process with the state library's planning, and way more money so that we can actually get out and continue the good work we're doing with insufficient funds.
Over the number of cycles of LSTA evaluations that I've been involved in, we are seeing more states that are trying to integrate their LSTA plans with their general state library plans. And I think that's a really, really good trend that you point out. And we do try to take kind of a holistic look at the evaluation, that this is just a portion of what happens, but what happens with LSTA dollars happen within a context, and that context is really important for us to understand. The other thing that I'd mention is there is an effort underway by COSLA and some of the COSLA members to increase the small population state portion of the formula that's used for LSTA distribution. And while that will help a little, if that in fact happens, I think a lot of people share your thought that a whole lot more in the way of federal investment is probably something that would be very, very good. There have been some efforts to get the C back into the program, the construction portion, and that's not just states that have got some big skies and wide open spaces like Montana, but some very, very urban states as well. So some really good points. Others, as far as either stories to relate or impact of LSTA dollars that you've seen in the recent years.
Bill, I'll add a piece here. I'm an academic librarian, so I'm not, we're not part of the shared catalog, but I can see the tremendous impact of the shared catalog on Montana. I mean, I may not have my numbers exactly right, but I think there are 183 libraries that are part of the shared catalog. And it's clear that most of them would not be able to have their own catalog if it were not for this funding. And so I think that brings tremendous value to the state. I do have a question. You mentioned the allotment of $1.2 million a year, and you said that's $1.06 per capita for Montana.
Mhm.
So is the per capita allotment a standardized metric across LSTA, or are there other states that get more per capita?
That is where the base grant kind of thing comes into play. So your $1.06 is kind of a favorable number compared to many. I think don't hold me to this number, but I believe California is somewhere around 47 cents per capita. So that base grant, because Montana gets the base grant, and that's the same for California as it is for Montana, you benefit from that portion as opposed to California, who gets boatloads of money, but they get it based on the population portion.
Thank you. That's helpful to know that.
And there's a little bit of a balancing that occurs. Congress, when they reauthorized the Library Services Technology Act, which happened, I can't remember, 2 or 3 years ago now, they then will authorize a new base, but they don't typically fund LSTA to fund that new base. Initially, it can take a period of years as Congress passes budgets to fully fund that base. And so it is that base that really benefits Montana and other small population states. As LSTA funds increase above what would fully fund that base, then the larger population states benefit until that base catches up. So it's a little bit of a stair-step approach. But right now, as Congress is working to fully fund a new base, we will continue to see the greatest increase in our LSTA funds because we benefit from that base.
Yep.
That would be easier explained with charts and graphs.
I wanted to add something too, just for your leadership thoughts as you're going forward. We are completely focused on LSTA, but we're also very aware that there's other funding opportunities that are present as well. CARES Act funding, ARPA. This has made, for state library organizations across the country, this has made a full schedule of work trying to balance all these programs. And I think one thing to keep in mind, just as a strategic thought, LSTA funding is ongoing, and they're definitely, we would look forward to any improvements to that program to be more effective. These other are one time, and they need to be spent very quickly. And so I think as you're looking at programs, it can start getting confusing, but remembering that the LSTA funded programs have some persistence over time, or potential for persistence if they're being successful. The other things are going to be in and out, and they require different sorts of strategies going forward.
Any other thoughts or comments that anyone would like to add? Looking backward or looking forward as well, what's missing from what I talked about that you see as being needs that LSTA could help address? Again, probably not in total, but could be leveraged to try to address. What are some of the needs that you see moving forward in that 5-year plan?
I just wanted to share some additional perspective on some of the softer benefits of how we use our LSTA funds, especially for some of our newer commissioners that aren't as familiar with these dollars. There are other states that award these dollars to libraries as subgrants and manage application processes for competitive grant programs. And the state library, in essence, then acts as the granting vehicle for libraries to receive those funds. And the state of Montana moved away from that model at least a couple of decades ago for several reasons, but one of which was the view that model didn't support the kinds of equity and collaboration that we really felt would benefit all libraries in the state. And so we shifted our model to supporting the kinds of statewide programs that you've heard Bill and Carson describe. And to the very best of our ability, we try to support all types of libraries through these programs with the resources that allow. When I talk to other state librarians about the atmosphere in their states, I often hear about libraries competing over scarce dollars. And I think one of the significant benefits of how we use our dollars, and maybe it's a chicken and egg thing, maybe it was that collaborative spirit that prompted us to move to a more statewide model, or maybe it's the funding model that results in the collaborative spirit that we have. But we've created a model through these programs where libraries really benefit from relying on one another, and they understand the need to collaborate together. And I don't think that we would see that kind of model if we were in fact continuing to support a competitive grant program. And I'm just incredibly proud when I talk about the work of the state library, the number of libraries that we're supporting, the kinds of benefits they see, both in terms of real delivery of library services, as well as the collegiality that exists within the Montana library community.
You'd also make a very, very good argument for the fact that states with smaller amounts of money could really suck up an awful lot of those funds by grant administration. You know, if you've got $1.2 million to give out and you have to put into place a whole grant administration and accounting systems and reporting systems and that kind of thing for administering the grants, that takes a lot of staff effort that could be going in other directions. So it's probably much more practical for a California or Texas to have a robust sub-grant program than it is for Montana or Wyoming to have a robust sub-grant program. And the effectiveness, I think, on equity, as Jenny mentions, can be pretty powerful. The negative to that right now is states that have robust sub-grant programs are probably finding it easier to deal with CARES Act and ARPA funds. Because they've got in place kind of a mechanism for how do we push the money out to benefit localities directly very quickly, as Carson mentioned. Any other thoughts about those needs, unmet needs? We don't want to take up all your time, but we do want to tap your thoughts just a little bit in terms of those futures.
Bill, I want to talk a little bit about, continue that thread that we were just talking about. And,
okay.
you know, I certainly understand the pros and cons of a sub-grants program, but I do just want to make a pitch for what I see as some real benefits of a sub-grant program. When I was a younger librarian in the late 1990s and early 2000s in Utah, the state library did run an LSTA sub-grant program, and it was instrumental in launching some pretty significant statewide projects, several of which are still in existence, like the Mountain West Digital Library and the Utah Digital Newspapers program. And for me to be able to apply for those grants served two purposes, really. One was to get the funding to start these initiatives, But the second was sort of a broader professional development purpose. You know, it trained me and many others to learn how to apply for grants in a larger federal setting. You know, LSTA grants led to some pretty significant IMLS funding and NEH funding, NARA funding. You know, there were a variety of federal agencies that I don't think I or my colleagues would ever have tried for had we not had that lower barrier and kinder, you know, sort of mentoring process of the LSTA subgrant program in our state. So it eventually enabled us to bring in a lot more money. So it's another way to leverage potentially LSTA funding.
I think the mistake that sometimes is made with subgrant programs is giving dollars for things that may be flavor of the day kinds of things, you know, not particularly innovative, but kind of extra add-ons. I think what Kenny's talking about is subgrants being used for innovative purposes that then can be broadened or replicated. You know, you've essentially got a let's dip our toe in a little bit in the e-resources area with your LSTA dollars right now. You know, it's not a tremendous dollar amount that's going into that area, but it's a significant amount. You know, it's not it's not pennies. It's tens of thousands of dollars as opposed to hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it's an area where you can be demonstrating something. And I think that innovation portion, the states that are most successful with the subgrant area are the ones that understand kind of the stepping stones and the longer term benefits, look a little bit longer than what something nice that we can do that lasts a year. Any other comments about those futures?
I'd like to just kind of expand a little bit on some of the things that have been said. You know, I think that it is really useful to think about what Jenny and Kenny have talked about, the statewide projects to serve all versus the sort of the regranting to assist local libraries. And I would be the last person to say that all problems can be met with a statewide program. I think in the end, library services are frequently, you know, best addressed locally. And having said that, there are things that we can do on a statewide basis that improve, that make it easier for local libraries to kind of get their local job done. And I think you know, where we have concentrated on those at the state library, you know, we've done well. To Kenning's point, the shared catalog or the Montana Memory Project, courier services, et cetera. So when we're thinking about how we evaluate those statewide projects, I think that we should look to see, you know, are we spending money to improve cooperation, to improve the inner workings of partners and expanding the list of partners, and most of all, you know, is how we're spending money, is how we're spending our resources, improving trust amongst librarians in the state, because that's clearly the intangible that without trust, nothing happens. So I think that's important. On the other hand, and I think sometimes we're a little bit cautious with LSTA funds to think about this because it sounds a little bit like politicking and marketing and stuff. But there is an increasing need for local support of local libraries. And I think the state library has a role to play in helping local libraries take and build that support throughout Montana. When the special mill levy is run, it you know, touch wood, it seems to be successful. But I think that there's kind of a two-pronged approach. We need to build trust in cooperation for statewide stuff, and you know, more pleased of that because it really works well. And there's still lots of room for doing that. On the other hand, there's this kind of a maybe almost infinite need for improving local support and getting that local and getting that local support is difficult for libraries. And I think that there's an ongoing role for the state library to provide those kinds of works. And I would like to see that as part of our LSTA plan.
Yeah, I found it really fascinating and interesting. The shared catalog is under a goal called collaboration. So that, while the end purpose obviously is those finding tools, the sharing of resources, the movement of materials among libraries, there is that other piece that of demonstrating that we can accomplish more together than we can as individuals. Carson is want to say public libraries are hyper local. That's one of his favorite terms. That hyper local nature, and that's very, very true, as Bruce said. It comes down to where the rubber hits the road. But at the same time, that demonstration of that collaborative framework that allows us to do more with less is a really, really important outcome, as we see it already, of Montana's program.
We need to constantly improve our ability to walk and chew gum simultaneously.
Yeah. Any other thoughts for the good of the order of our LSTA efforts here? We would like, if we could, to speak individually with some of you. And so if you want to indicate to Jenny that you'd like to talk with us, it sounds as if you're already talking to some other consultants on some other topics, and I'm sure you don't want to spend all of your days doing that. But by the same token, the closer that we can get to the end user in this evaluation, the better the evaluation will be. And so you as representatives, both of libraries and as of representatives of the general public, can be really, really helpful. And we can schedule either Zoom or telephone interviews with you and be very respectful of your time, do it around your schedule as well. So do let Jenny or the State Library staff know that you'd be willing to talk with us one-on-one, and we'll follow up with that. Finally, any questions of us before Carson and I are going to disappear on you here, but any other thoughts or questions that you might have?
Aside from potential individual conversations, when is the next time that the commission might hear from you?
Didn't look at that framework, but my guess is probably, how often is your commission meeting?
6 months a year, well, 6 times a year.
6 times, so essentially every other month. So October, November, it would be December. I think it makes sense for us to, we're going to have the certainly the beginnings and the framework of our findings by the time you meet in December. So it would make sense for us to make a short report of preliminary findings in December.
That sounds great.
Great.
Well, thank you very much for being here today, Bill and Carson. We look forward to your work, and please give our best to Martha. Hopefully we'll see
All
her
right.
next time.
We will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye for now.
So do we want to move on to the next item with the Montana Historical Society, or do we want to take a quick break? Does anybody need a break?
I'm good to keep going, Kenny.
Hearing no call for a break. Great. Okay. Thank you. Molly, you have the stage.
All right, thank you so much, Kenning. And thank you, commissioners, for allowing us to speak with you this morning. I'm going to start by introducing myself. I'm Molly Krukenberg, the director of the Montana Historical Society. And we're here to talk to you about a potential opportunity to partner with the upcoming construction of the Montana Heritage Center on a sensory garden. So a partnership with the Historical Society. I have three folks joining me this morning, and I'll introduce them quickly. Jennifer James is our project liaison from the Department of Architecture, the Division of Architecture and Engineering within the Montana State Department of Administration. So Jennifer's on your screen there. Tabor McFadgen is a principal with Main Street Design, and that's our interpretive design firm that's working with us on all of the interior and exterior design components of the Montana Heritage Center. And Wes Baumgartner is also with us. Wes is a landscape architect with Cushing Terrell, who is our architecture and engineering firm for the Montana Heritage Center. I think that Genevieve was going to give me permission to share my screen. So I'm going to see if I can make that happen.
Yes, you should be able to share.
All right, perfect. Okay, can you all see that screen? It should be a picture of a beautiful building.
Yes.
Great. So I just want to start with a little bit of an overview of the plans for the Montana Heritage Center. I imagine many of you, especially those here in Helena, have some idea of what we're doing, but we received funding in 2019 that allowed us to start the construction of the Montana Heritage Center, which adds 68,000 square feet to our existing building. And then we'll completely remodel the existing Veterans and Pioneers Memorial Building, which you can kind of see in the back corner of the picture there. So it's a significant addition to the building that will more than double all of our exhibit size. Our exhibit spaces will include some additional public programming spaces for us, including an event center, 2 classrooms, vastly improved research center and reference space, and an event center that will seat 300 people, along with our a nice terrace there overlooking the space. Our timeline for construction, we've started construction. We're pouring footings this week, which is pretty exciting. And we will complete the addition of the building over the next 20 months or so, finishing that in mid-2023. And by the end of 2024, we'll have completed the remodel of the existing building, and that will complete our project. Our overarching budget for the building is $57 million. So this is just to give you an idea of the size and scope of our project. So as we start to talk about the sensory trail and that partnership, that will kind of, when we talk about budget a little bit later on along those lines, that won't maybe give you so much sticker shock. So one of the components of this project that we're really proud of is this exterior kind of landscapes trail, is how we began thinking about this, which is a trail that will start from the north side of the building or this end of the new addition and take you on a journey around to the west side of the building that takes you through the plains of eastern Montana, through the central part of the state, ending at the new grand entrance for the building within the mountains of the state. So it takes you through all of the different geographic regions of the state. We'll utilize native plants, native features, and some interpretive components there. And at this point, I'm going to turn our presentation over to Tabor, and he's going to talk about some of those interpretive components and how we intend to incorporate some sensory elements into that.
Tabor. Hi, everybody. I'm a long way from you all. I'm sitting here in my house on the coast of Maine, so I think I have the farthest distance to participate in the library meeting. Molly, do you want to just go to the next? I think the next slide shows the plan. Yeah. So Molly talked about how the trail really circles the north end of the building, the new addition. We had been planning to do a Montana Habitats trail really from the start of this project. And when Jenny and Evan came to us with the opportunity to partner with the library, it was just such an obvious win to use your resources and extend that experience, really rethink the experience as a multisensory all-persons trail. We had intended from the start to have both cultural and landscape artifacts or objects, installations, plant materials and hardscape materials. And the sort of leap from that initial idea to making as many of those things as multisensory as possible seemed really easy. So you can see the trail here. The little red marks, I won't bore you with the details. We're still very early in the design. But they sort of show you the distribution of elements across the trail. If you go to the next slide, Molly. And this is the main plaza outside the new west entrance to the Montana Heritage Center. And you can see that the elements extend all the way into the plaza. So you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen a teeny weeny little label that says Montana Landforms. That's actually referring to a sort of pool table sized tactile map of the state showing the progression of really east to west or west to east, depending on which direction you want to come, but how the landforms change from the mountains to the plains. Again, this was something that was in our concept originally, but we weren't focused on the multisensory aspect of it. As soon as we started talking with the library, we began to realize that there were these opportunities to create many different ways of experiencing this content. So if you go to the next slide, I think. So again, early days, this is just studies of what the graphics might be. This is a trailhead graphic or a test for a trailhead graphic. And what you're actually seeing is that this is a piece of Corten steel. It's cut and figured so that the reveal at the bottom, the pattern at the bottom is actually cut into the steel. So that gives a full tactile experience. And we're incorporating on the bottom right, text block is actually a Braille text block. So we've moved our graphics to being as tactile as they possibly can. We're exploring the possibility of interfacing, and actually I was on at the start of this program. I didn't realize that Evan was such a veteran, but we're working with Evan to think about how we can take advantage of the library's technological capabilities to do assistive listening and beacon-based interpretation as people walk on the trail. The goal here is to make the trail immersive and delightful to be in without it being a forest of signs and graphics. And again, the work that your library is already doing, I think dovetails exactly with what we're trying to create on this site. Go to the next one, Molly. So again, at this point, we're studying the ideas of how we could create these patterns. So these are what we call spirit images or precedent images. Obviously, the ones on the upper right are wood block. And one of the things we're trying to express, if we can, is the interaction between human cultural heritage and natural history in the state of Montana. I'm an Auslander, I'm not a Montanan, but we've been working on the project for a year or two, and I think I got that now, that cultural history, human history, and natural history are absolutely inseparable in the state. So we like the idea of trying to illustrate that literally in the panels themselves in a tactile way. You can go to the next slide, Molly. Just looking a little bit more closely, you can see the Braille on the bottom right, and that is the Montana state flower, I believe, and that is a tactile illustration. So we're creating, in the most basic way, the multisensory experiences as people walk along the trail. Wes will talk in a few moments about the ways in which the actual plant materials and the hardscaping, the rock and built forms will also be sensory experiences available to folks. I think we have a couple more graphic studies here. So this is a secondary graphic. We're, as Molly alluded to, we're planting all this stuff. We want to suggest the character of the state, but we recognize that we're not going to be able to actually replicate every one of the key bioregions in the state. So these habitat overview graphics are intended to illustrate photographically the different regions of the state, so that there's something real, if you will, to compare the plant materials and plantings to. And I think there's one more. Oh, so the smallest of the graphic elements, again, all tactile, is expressing individual plants or individual sculptural pieces. There will be many large pieces of public art on the grounds of the Heritage Center, and we want those ID labels to be accessible as well. Do you want to add anything, Wes? Are you there? Is this still in? It is still in, I think. That's a view framing device.
I'm here. I'm just waiting for my turn.
It's your turn.
So it's my turn, is that what you said?
I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, this is exciting stuff. Outside of what Molly kind of touched on the experience a little bit, and Tabor hit some of the high points. Just again, to describe the experience, we're trying to take people through the different habitats in Montana. The trail climbs upward on this screen from top of the screen to the bottom. It climbs up, and then that also represents kind of what happens in the state. As we take people up through those areas, there's lots of visual aspects of it, of course, the connection to native plants. So we picked a lot of the plants based on those significant to the people of Montana, including American Indians, as well as work with the Fish, Game, and Wildlife to pick plants that were friendly to wildlife, hopefully not too friendly to the deer, but friendly to wildlife in general. Provide a real connection to the state. Also, we're concerned about providing smell as well, a sense of smell, particularly after a rain. Hopefully we get some more next year, but the rain in the grasses and on the evergreens, and the smell of wildflowers blooming really help to accentuate the experience. Lots of opportunities to touch and feel objects outside of what Tabor talked about. There's stone, there's rocks, there's boulders, there are trees, there are logs, all those things that are at different various heights for people to be able to reach down and touch. We want people to be able to experience it that way, even if just running your hands through the grass as you move along. We're aware of creating a lot of different textures for people so that that becomes an interesting experience as well. And also different areas of sun and shade, so you can feel that the sun or find some shade. Sound, there's lots of grasses, as you saw in that one image, that as the wind blows, the sound of the rustle of the grasses is important, as well as the sound of the wind in the trees. We also have a water feature that relies on rainfall that's collected from the roof, and then drops into a planter that then cascades down some rocks. And so while it's raining, there certainly will be the sound of water cascading. This trail is accessible to all, and we really want to provide places throughout this trail network to explore, relax, enjoy the outdoors, and learn more about Montana. So that's it in a nutshell. They cover it well enough, Molly, Tabor?
Yeah. Molly, can I say one more thing quickly?
Sure, absolutely.
Because I won't shut up ever. So one of the things that has been so exciting for us about this project is seeing the relationships that already exist and the relationships that are being built among the institutions and organizations in the state. And I sat in on the commission meeting for the first little while and listened to the discussion of the evaluation. And I think the idea of a partnership between the library and the Historical Society not just around this project, but around all of your, I mean, so much mutual overlapping effort there, it seems to me. And it's just really exciting for me to have this opportunity.
One other thing too, if I might, quick, Molly, before you roll on, an important aspect that isn't shown in this rendering as well is the presence of various pieces of art and sculpture that reference different parts of the state and different peoples as well, that'll be placed along the trail in order to help people want to move on and see different experiences.
All right, thanks, Wes. So I think you've probably gathered from what Tabor and Wes had to say that one of our primary philosophies behind this building is exploring the way that the people who have lived in Montana, or the place that we call Montana, have interacted with the land, and how those two components of our past have really formed and shaped who we are as a state today. So for that reason, of course, the interior of the building is incredibly important to us, and there's a lot of experiences that will happen there. But the exterior of the building, including the landscapes trail, is of primary importance to this building. It's really a part of the whole experience of visiting the Heritage Center and learning about our past. And I think you probably heard it from Tabor and Wes as well. I'm very excited about the idea of making this a sensory experience. We've been working quite a lot with a number of different stakeholder groups, from the disability community to our Native American partners to the museum community and education community around the state, to ensure that we're bringing in multiple viewpoints, multiple ways that we can experience our past, to make sure that it's as inviting of a building and as much of a community space that we can make this Heritage Center be. So of course, you know, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can talk for a minute about the not exciting parts of this, which is the budget. As I mentioned earlier, it is a $57 million project. The landscaping itself is $3 million, and the design components of it that Tabor talked about are about $300,000. I bring that up because at the last commission meeting, you had asked for harder numbers on where we were going with the design. So that's what we're looking at in terms of, you know, for the entirety of the package that we'll create on the exterior of the building, all of the landscaping, all of the design and interpretive components will be about $3.3 million. And I think with that, I'll just ask if there's any questions for myself or Tabor or Wes, if there's additional information we can provide for the commissioners.
So especially for our new commissioners, what we want to do is get a sense from all of you about your interest in trying to support this proposal, the idea of making sure that, to the extent possible, we're creating opportunities for all people to experience Montana and the Heritage Center and what they're offering. As we said at our last meeting, we really believe it's the role of the State Library to provide access to information beyond books. And we've thought a lot about what that means to think beyond books. And we think, especially for our specialized clientele of the Talking Book Library, that this creates just a real positive opportunity for us to think about that. As you saw in your finance report, the State Library's trust has about 1.7, almost 1.8 million in it. About 300,000 of that is obligated, and that money is sits in the trust and it earns interest. We cannot use those monies for ongoing operations of the State Library. They're truly available for special projects, and it's at the discretion of the commission to determine how we spend those funds. And so, like I said, today is a day for us to answer your questions and get your sense of whether or not it's appropriate for the State Library to invest in this way. And then I would suggest that we work with the Finance Committee to talk about an appropriate contribution to this proposal, if it's the sense of the commission that this is something that we want to pursue.
And Jenny, one thing I did not address, I mentioned a couple of times it's a $57 million project. Of those funds, $10 million of those are required to be private funds. So the Historical Society is obligated to raise $10 million towards this project. And so this contribution would help us reach that goal. We have $6.3 million raised at this point, and of course are continuing work on that. But we do appreciate the State Library and the Commission's interest in this project, and thinking that it dovetails so nicely with what we're planning anyway. And I do want to mention, I see Jennifer Burnell's on this call. Within the building, we'll be using the assets of the Montana Memory Project and all the materials that are up there to further improve enhancements to collections and access to collections within the building as well. So just a side note there that other partnerships with the State Library will be going on inside the building as well.
I'm glad you
Molly,
brought that up. Oh, sorry.
So I'll just say these are beautiful plans, and I have to admit to a little bit of jealousy, but I'm very happy for you and the Historical Society. So Jenny, just to be clear, what you're looking for today is just a sense from the commissioners of whether we support providing some funding in principle, providing some funding, but that funding is yet in undetermined amount.
That's correct. And I would suggest that we then direct the Finance Committee to talk about what amount might be appropriate from our trust to contribute and bring that proposal back to the full commission.
Okay, Kristen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I was so excited about this project when I saw the architect renderings. I think it was in the IR, maybe, I don't know, 9 months ago. I was over the moon because I just thought it was going to be something, a destination for people to come to in the state of Montana, right next to the Capitol. And I think it is a beautiful collaboration with the Library Commission for us to have a vested part in this project. And I am just so thrilled beyond words to see the renderings and the descriptions and everything you've discussed so far about the integration of all different facets, the tactile for, the Braille, all of this, the sensory inclusion on that. I think this is just going to be something really beautiful that we're going to be proud to put our stamp on. And so I'm eager to show support from our commission.
Thanks, Kristen. I didn't talk about that at all, but this is intended to be a destination, but not just a destination to Helena. We of course want people to come visit the Heritage Center, but we intend in the interior of the building to have some sort of interactive map or kiosk that will hopefully drive tourists to all of the communities around the state that have museums, libraries, cultural organizations or institutions that we should be pushing people to so that they can learn more about Yellowstone and Glacier, but reach out into these other parts of our states. And so it really is our intent to draw people to us, but to push them out as well around the state. So thank you for those comments. And if anyone's interested, there are more plans and more images on the project website, which is montanasmuseum.org.
Thank you. Bruce, you have your hand up.
Yes. So when I first heard about this idea, one of my first thoughts was, besides very cool, and this is a great opportunity for the Historical Society and the State Library, but I thought, Molly talked about the Montana Memory Project and how that integrates into some of the society's plans, and I think that is terrific and completely 112% appropriate. One of the things that we have, the building that is having its footings poured today, and the State Library has had for a long time the footings for sort of a popular, accessible version of field guides available for a long time. But this might be a great opportunity for the State Library to think about developing a view of those data that get used by professionals and by some of us who are not professionals but are able to get lost in it. But a kind of a popular field guide that would then benefit kids and bird watchers and casual walkers and ranchers and stuff to get a view of their stuff. And I can see how this might provide sort of as a way of this garden might provide sort of a showcase for this popular field guide view of the data that we're currently working on. And so when we're thinking about signs and stuff and these textural kinds of things in the garden, it would be great also to have QR codes or something that would expose people to this popular view of these data that we're spending huge amounts of money on, well spent money, but that are kind of a hidden gem. I'd like to make that gem less hidden.
We actually did discuss that in our preliminary discussions with Evan and Jenny, trying to take advantage of that data resource that you have. So it's right there.
Thank you.
Robin, you're next.
I just want to say ditto to what Kristen said. I just today seen the architectural plans. Wow, that's beyond. I'm so excited. I can't wait to go. I can't wait to be there to see it come to fruition. I mean, I'm just that's so wonderful. I'm just excited. Thank you very much for all your hard work on that. And definitely how wonderful for the Montana State Library to be able to have a part in this. I mean, wow. Great. Just wonderful.
Thanks, Robin. And I'll just give praise where it's due. Our team at Cushing Terrell and Main Street Design have been amazing at their design work and the what they've pulled together for the building. And that's how we've ended up with this absolutely gorgeous design.
Any other comments, Peggy or Elsie?
I agree. I'm so excited too. That was the first thing I thought was, when is this going to be done so I can come? And going to museums and reading everything and walking through there's just been a family thing that we've done forever. And to tie it all into the Montana Memory Project and really focus on Montana. Eastern gal, I think Robin can attest to this, to have that progression is wonderful from the mountains to the prairies. The prairies don't always get what's due to them. So I'm excited to see all of it.
Well, thank you.
Believe me, we've heard that over the last 18 months.
That's been a constant part of our conversation. Like I said, inclusivity is a primary philosophy of our project. And that includes all types of inclusivity, from every county of the state to every ethnicity that's called Montana home, to every gender, and just making sure that all of those stories are told, all of our experiences are accessible to everybody that have a call, to everybody who has called Montana home or who's visiting to learn about Montana.
Say, Molly, I have just a quick question on the pictures that we saw. I saw lots of themes being represented. Is geology kind of the landform beyond but also sandstone, gneiss, blah blah blah? Is that all being represented?
I promise.
Okay.
We actually, I didn't want to take up the whole meeting by going through every detail. In addition to the plant materials and the sensory experiences that Wes described, we have two actual sort of exploratory activities. One is a fossil discovery activity and one is a Montana geology activity. Again, they're tactile. We've been back and forth on the fossils. I was just working on it this morning. We think we want to embed the fossils, and they'll be replicas, of course, but we think we want to embed them in the way that they might appear on a scree slope, as opposed to a prepared object in a museum, because we want folks to experience that thrill of seeing something poking out of the ground and getting excited about it. So yes, geology, paleontology, and cultural and habitat are
Right.
the
I mean, we've got
pieces.
dinosaurs, we've got the Rocky Mountains kind of plowing up the plains as they move east. I mean, there's a lot of exciting stuff that would imagine really lend itself to the beauty and the educational aspects of this.
Yeah, and I think if it wasn't already clear, I just want to say, I mean, it sounds like we're come begging for money, and we are coming begging for money, but you have a remarkable resource in the work that you're already doing at the library. And so I think the opportunity that our team saw was the partnership. I mean, yeah, money's always helpful, but what Evan is doing and what Jenny is doing in the library, you're going to be part of our design team, whether you like it or not, moving forward.
Elsie, do you have any comment to add?
Good morning, all. Trying to multitask here and get everything together. You know, I served on the Capitol Complex Commission, or the committee, for many, many terms when I was a senator. The important thing that I believe here is something new has been added to the footprint here in Helena, the seat of government. What I'd also like to see is if there's any connectivity, Molly, between the library, because we're in a rock's throw from there, and the rest of the buildings that I believe are there. We have a shiny penny that's going to be here, but we don't want, I would like to see some nexus then to the rest. And I know that's not under your purview per se, or any of the individuals that are working through this, but to understand that something new is here, it needs to be tethered and tied to the existing government that we have in Helena. Because when people come, we don't just shout out the beautiful Capitol and the Rotunda. We want to shout out the rest of the great work and effort that is done for the citizens of Montana. So that would be my only comment here. I'm excited for this to be completed. Looked at it for many, many years, for many, many times, where it could be, where it could land. And I'm glad that dirt is being moved. Let's put it that way.
Thanks, Elsie. I'll make a couple of comments. You can't see it in this image of the building, but the connection between the addition and the existing Montana Historical Society building is a glass. It's kind of touches lightly on what's a National Register building. So there's a lot of glass there. Because we closed 6th Avenue, which is kind of that primary access between like Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the State Building to the Capitol building, we've deliberately kept that space as a traffic flow area. So it's an inviting space where people who are perhaps visiting the library might walk through, visit the Heritage Center while they make a trip then to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, or direct them over to the state library. It's meant to be a welcoming spot, also a place where people might move between all of those agencies to the Capitol building. There'll be a cafe in there, a store in there. We won't have to pay admission to go through those spaces. It's going to be an open space where the public can come and interact with one another, use it as a through space. We're also making our trail connect in a few different ways with the existing walking trail that exists on the Capitol campus, so that as people are walking kind of that 1 mile loop that's around the Capitol campus, that they can incorporate this trail or the walk through the building in their walk around the campus. And of course, the Historical Society does I take care of all of the art in the Capitol building, and we're hoping to reopen our tours to the Capitol building as well. And we've worked with the Department of Administration to create all of the National Register signs for the Capitol campus district that are around the state. And so kind of tying in, as you said, Elsie, tying in all of those things so that it's not just this one site, but we really want to tell the history of all of Montana. And one of those components, of course, is that Helena being the seat of government. And so telling that story as well. So appreciate your comments on that, Elsie. I will also say, I know that the Department Architecture and Engineering Division is looking at redoing the Capitol Campus Master Plan, which will take into account the current design for the Heritage Center and how that can be built upon to improve the rest of the Capitol campus. That's a much longer term project, but I know that that's in the works.
I'm really glad you brought up those points, Elsie and Molly. I was going to mention too, just some of the landscaping and signage that the state has been developing over the last couple of years. We really hope that what we're talking about here can set a standard for inclusivity, for the kinds of signage and other kinds of sensory inclusion that exists or might exist in the future with those kinds of future developments around the Capitol complex. I think that's a really important point.
That's a great point, Jenny.
Okay, it sounds like the commissioners are in favor in principle of supporting this this project. Is that a fair statement? Jenny, I don't think we need any kind of a formal vote on this, right? So it's just by acclamation. We agreed to go to the next step of sending this to the Finance Committee to figure out what the trust might be able to support.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you all, Wes and Tavera and Jennifer. Thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to add one comment about the design. I think it's a fabulous design. I'm really excited as well to see it. But I have to say, it's always nice to see fair weather renderings and images of what this will look like, but we do have long winters in Montana, and I would encourage you to include some renderings about what this will look like in the winter and to think about whether and how that trail will be accessible in the winter.
Thanks, Kenny. We've actually had some discussions already with the General Service Division that takes care of the State Capitol campus and making, so, Tabor mentioned having the fossils embedded. So we're having conversation about how wide our sidewalks are, how wide our trails are, so they can be cleaned in the winter, making sure that those protrusions aren't an obstacle for clearing the path. So absolutely, we agree. We want this to be a space that's used year round, although I suspect it will be used most in the summer. But we do intend to make sure it's a year round. We don't have any winter renderings, but it would be fun to see.
Yeah, I should have known you were on it. So thanks again for your presentation.
All right, thank you. And please let me know if there's any additional information that we can provide.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm going to suggest that we take a short break. Is 5 minutes enough, or would you like 10 minutes? Anyone?
How about 10 minutes?
Okay, so we will be back at 11:54. Okay.
Sounds good. See you then.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Importantly, Tracy, are you ready to go?
I am, and I believe we have the coordinators here with us. Jenny asked me to really quickly, for the sake of the new commissioners, give a brief overview of what federations are and also kind of the role of the commission at different parts of the year. And so I'm going to pop a link in the chat because maps are good, and there is a map on this page that you can click on as commissioners. And if you scroll down, you'll see the boundaries of the federations. So basically, there are currently 6 federations in Montana. This law has been in the Montana Code since 1939. However, as far as I can tell from the research I've done so far, the first federation came about in 1957. and it was comprised of 5 counties over in western Montana. And then we had another federation up in Cascade County and Pend Oreille County, which would be Conrad, and Great Falls, Cascade, and Belt, and that was another federation. So you can see the boundaries have changed over time. What you are looking at is these current federations have been in existence for quite some time. They're comprised of primarily public libraries, although school, academic, and special libraries are welcome to join the federation. Many of the federations do try to find ways to include their non-public library members. I will say most of the funding, though, goes to support public libraries. The purpose of federations is to give libraries within a region a mechanism for coming together to deliver efficient library service and to pool resources. And so that is one thing I want you to keep in mind as you think about the federations and what they do. And it's something that the coordinators and I have talked about as well. So the commission in the spring through your normal budgeting process sets the funding for federations. They are funded through coal tax monies at this point in time. There's a formula in the administrative rules of Montana that spells out how the money is going to be divided. And basically half of it roughly is divided by 6, which is the number of federations, and the remaining half is apportioned based on population. So in the spring, the federations adopt a plan of service, which is basically a budget. And you as a commission approve those plans of service in June. And then that directs state library staff and tells us how much funding to send to each of the libraries within a federation. And libraries must meet the public library standards. The public libraries must meet those standards in order to receive this funding. And then we ask the libraries to spend those funds by June 30th and then report on how they spent them. And that report comes to you in October for you to adopt. And so that's why we are here. We also use this October meeting as an opportunity for you to hear directly from the federation coordinators about what's happened in their federation in the last year. The federation coordinators are selected by the member libraries, and they basically work with state library staff on the paperwork, on the budgeting, on the reporting, and then also just the logistics of arranging meetings. I would say, though, the most important role the federation coordinators play is they are often mentors and leaders within that region, and their libraries turn to them to ask them questions or to get guidance on things federation related, but I would say much broader than that. So that's just kind of a brief overview of federations and what they are and what they do. Do you have any questions before I introduce the coordinators and turn it over to them?
Doesn't look like there are any questions.
All right, great. So I did not catch this on the agenda. On your agenda, it says that the coordinator of Golden Plains is Janine Brookie and the coordinator of Tamarack is Honor Bray. Both Janine and Honor stepped down after many, many years of service in June. And so Jonna Underwood, the director of the Sheridan County Library in Plentywood, is now the coordinator of Golden Plains. And Abby Dooley, the director of the North Lake County Library in Polson, is now the coordinator of Tamarack. And so with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to the coordinators, and they're just going to give you their reports in the order that's presented in the agenda. So Lori, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
I'm Lori Roberts from the Dillon Public Library. I'm the director here, and I am the coordinator for the Broad Valleys Federation. Do you guys, what kind of questions would you like to ask me? What would you like to know? I do have to say, Kenning, I wish my office was 78 degrees because right now it's maybe 50.
Killing me.
Do you want to just talk briefly, Lori, maybe about how the last year has been, both the ups and downs for the Broad Valleys Federation? And
Sure. So there are 22 libraries within my federation, and we we meet twice a year. We usually meet in the spring, and we have a retreat and get together and do in-person things. We have not been able to do in-person in the last 2 years, which is very sad. And our goal is to have in 2022 an in-person meeting again. We also, there's been a lot of discussion around COVID policies, you know, that kind of thing. We have new librarians within our federation, so I've gotten quite a few calls just for regular directorship kind of questions. We talked about hotspots, and hotspots seem to be very popular right now. Our library personally, I think we have 6 hotspots. And so not only are our hotspots serving our community, but also all college students, because the Western, I don't know, there's something weird with Western's internet. And so we end up with the college students coming down and getting hotspots. Let's see, what else? Belgrade, they are going to get a new building this next year, or they're working on getting a new building this next year. So that's exciting. Let's see. Our greatest needs, one of the things that we talked about is continuing to invest in e-content and what will help the community. Also, enhance the Montana Memory Project, upgrade internal networks here, like cabling and routers and things like that here in Dillon. I would love to have fiber optics within our library so that we can run our computers faster and we don't have the internet problems. The fiber optics is at the end of the block, like right down the alley next door. And the cost of getting it into the library is astronomical.
So this is Bruce.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about what are the biggest problems and what are the biggest opportunities. It sounds to me as if some of the biggest opportunities, the problems are lack of World Wide Web speed, and biggest opportunity is improving that in your library. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Do you think that that would be the same throughout the Broad Valleys, or are there other really pressing needs and sparkling opportunities that we should know about? And with maybe a little bit of an emphasis on things that we can do as the state library or as partners to help you.
I think that there's quite a few libraries within our federation that have the internet issues. We have learned of these internet issues as we have been doing these virtual meetings more so. Yeah, you glitch out, you lose service, it dies. There's all kinds of crazy issues that happen while we're doing these meetings. And I know that there's been building challenges for other libraries, just building challenges themselves and getting help from their communities and such to even update their libraries.
The physical plant?
Yeah. So here I got a grant from the state, but it was a 2-year process to get that grant. And then we're on the National Registry. And I know that there's quite a few other libraries within the Federation that are on the National Registry also. So you have those barriers that you have to go through, and it takes such a long process that, we had water entering our building, and it took us 2 years to get the water entering the building fixed because we're on the registry. So there's been some, and the older buildings in Belgrade, they got a bond, I believe is what they got, to get a new building, which is great. And, hopefully they can have more space. I know that a lot of the littler towns, they have smaller libraries. They don't have quite the meeting space that they would like. So there's just some restrictions and opportunities that we cannot offer our community just because we're limited. I know that there's been quite a few people with staffing issues. COVID has really hit, and a lot of people quit for COVID. They were worried about it, and to try to get somebody to work has been a challenge in a lot of libraries. A lot of them are underfunded. funding, it would be nice for our libraries if our funding was equal with our city pay and we were on the same city pay scale. That would be awesome, because for some reason, libraries technically aren't city, they're technically not county, they're kind of a mismatch of everything. The library board's the one that sets that, but you know, all of our HR is either county or city. And so it'd be nice if they would put us on that exact same pay scale and provide those opportunities for the librarians that they offer the other city employees.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Lori, when you say the cost of bringing fiber optic into the library is astronomical, can you put a dollar figure on that?
It's $40,000 to put fiber optics into my library and go, I want to say maybe 100 yards.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And one other question, you said back to your comment about the hotspots. Did I hear you correctly that it's mostly Western students who are coming to use those hotspots?
No, we have a huge waiting list in our community. So we have community members, we have families that homeschool and things like that. And with COVID, their homeschool kids would go up to Western and do things. And they've kind of limited who can be on campus. And so we have a lot of homeschoolers using them. We have a lot of, because of the virtual meetings and people aren't doing in-person meetings, we find that we have our hotspots going out to organizers so that they can properly facilitate these Zoom meetings and have continual access and hopefully not lose service. And then we also do have the students coming and themselves in and getting hotspots.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Lori? Okay. Thanks, Lori.
Thank you.
So the next person to give her report is Jonna, and she'll be talking about Golden Plains.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonna Underwood, and I am the library director at the Sheridan County Library up in Plentywood. As Tracy mentioned, I replaced Janine Brookie, who had been our Federation coordinator for many, many years. So I've got some big shoes to fill there. Janine had done such a great job for us as our coordinator, so hopefully I'm up to the task here. When I talked to our Federation at our last Federation meeting, I asked them some questions and some feedback for when I spoke to you all. And I guess for those of us up here, you know, we're all in the far northeastern corner of the state. We're pretty remote. We don't have a whole lot of population up here. Dealing with COVID was probably one of the hardest things for all of us. Most of us did shut down for a little bit. We didn't suffer as badly as some areas in the state did, because we were able to open up our libraries fairly soon after closing. But dealing with, you know, should we quarantine books, and how long should we quarantine the books, and where do we put the books after we quarantine them? And so we had some issues that we talked together with about how each library was kind of managed that. The hotspots were very welcome. For my library, they were very welcome, especially during COVID. We had a little bit of a spike during the school year, and they circulated pretty frequently during that spike. For some of the other libraries, the hotspots, iPads, etc., was kind of a mixed bag with some of their patrons. You know, you've got some patrons that really embrace technology and some patrons that are a little leery of it, but overall, I think they were very happy to have that additional technology. As far as changes in our Federation, we've had one new director, Andy Hayes, who was the library director at the Roosevelt County Library for many years. She retired last year, and one of her staff members, Janet Livingston, took over for her, so we had change there. And aside from me becoming the coordinator, not much else happening in our federations. The library directors did want me to reiterate and just tell them how very appreciative they are of the state library, just for their support and not forgetting about us way out here in our close to North Dakota area. And they're just very appreciative of having the support that we do get. Any questions?
Where do you think the biggest opportunities are for you guys up in the corner there? And how do we assist you with those opportunities?
I think, when I asked them about that, I think an opportunity for them, which would be nice, is, for example, we have one library that's not on the shared catalog. I know a lot of the support funding that we get goes to the resource sharing and technology, which you can see if you look on the Federation page there. A majority of the funds that our library spend is on that. Funding to help cover things like the shared catalog, Montana Library to Go. These are all resources that are really helpful for those of us in these pretty rural, remote areas. And having that support to free up other funds that those libraries can use of their own is really helpful. A couple of the libraries are experiencing some budgeting issues. One in particular is really experiencing some issues there. She's a little concerned. So any opportunity that we had to apply funds towards those type of support projects, I think is really helpful.
Would better, faster, cheaper courier service help at all?
The courier. In a way, we kind of courier amongst ourselves anyway, just via the mail. It might. I think courier is something we would have to talk about amongst each other in a more serious manner to find out if that would truly be helpful for us, because we do share amongst each other quite a bit. So I think it's a discussion we should have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jonna.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jonna. Great job. I know this was your first one. So the next person is Valerie Frank, who's the coordinator of the Pathfinder Federation.
Good afternoon. So I am Valerie Frank. I'm the director at the Blaine County Library in Chinook. We have 15 libraries in the Pathfinder Federation. We do have one library that was not eligible to receive Federation funds this year due to non-compliance of standards. So those funds were redistributed to the other member libraries. We also have a library whose funds were not received due to the state of Montana withholding all state funds to that county due to financial issues within that county. Top use of our funds, hands down, is for resource sharing and technology, mainly for shared catalog, Montana Library to Go, OCLC. So I think, there's a huge need for technology funding. I agree with Jonna on that, if we had extra funding, that would be a great place for the state library to apply that to free up some of our other Federation funding to go to other areas. And like everybody, we've had a lot of challenges with the COVID, not being able to meet in person, which I think, it's great to be able to do the online meetings, but you get so much out of the in-person meetings where you can chat with other librarians. I think the hotspots have been really spectacular. in our library, it took a long time for them to catch on. I think that COVID laid bare the need for better internet and things like hotspots. We have been able to increase our internet speed here thanks to Spectrum moving into the area and giving Triangle some competition. So Triangle lowered their prices, which enabled us to improve our connection speeds. And we do have a couple of new directors in Glacier County and one that will be starting in Choteau County here shortly. And I don't know if you have any questions for me.
So Valerie, the one library that was not able to receive funds because it did not meet the standards, have they been able to come into compliance, or will they be able to?
I do not know the answer to that. You would have to ask Tracy.
Tracy.
Yeah, so Kenning, they are working towards compliance. I hope that they can come into compliance. Joe Flick and I work with that particular individual quite a bit. So at this point, they haven't been successful at meeting the standard, which is the certification standard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Valerie? Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val. So the next one is Sonia Woods. She is the coordinator of the Sagebrush Federation.
I hope you can hear me. I'm guessing you can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm starting to feel like an oldster around here. Sagebrush Federation has 10 counties that are in our federation. We have 10 public libraries, and one of our libraries, Glendive, also has a branch library. The conversation I really want to have with you is our library is very similar to the reports that you have just heard from the 3 libraries before me, but what we have discussed many times over is ongoing funding, such as you talk about hotspots and being a really good, it really helped a lot of people this year, but going down the road, what do you have for funding? What do you do if that funding runs out? How do we afford something that is extra to our budgets? It's always a big question. Then when it comes to things like the funds that we actually receive for the Federation, almost all of us turn around and write a check right back to the state library to pay for MSC or OCLC or Montana Library to Go. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice if instead of this money just passing back and forth, if there was some funds on the state level that were dedicated to paying for MSC for everyone, which of course is a bigger discussion because we realize it isn't just public libraries, but it's any type of statewide library, whether it's a school library or a hospital library or historical society, whoever wants to be a part of the shared catalog. So we find that an essential service for all of us, and wish there was a different way that it could be funded, whether through the legislature, which we know which would be quite a process, but would be a nice process to have undertaken. As far as COVID, I've decided we're pretty resilient over here. That most of the libraries, some of them never closed. They just had one person work the library and deliver it out the front door or drove it to somebody's home and dropped it off. And when it came to summer reading programs, we went ahead with them and had them outdoors and made sure the kids spaced and wore masks and sent them home with projects they could do. So, I think we're pretty resilient in Eastern Montana. It's farm ranch community and people take care of each other. And I think that's been the major discussion over here is while other libraries have to figure out a way to do things, we seem to just pitch in and get it done. So it's a good spirit. And we're all very, very thankful for the help we get from the state library. I've, on a personal level, had some training done with my foundation and library board by Stuart Wilson. And it was excellent training. Knowing that we have those resources that we can call on is always good to know. And a discussion we had is it good to have a friends group? Is it good to have a foundation? How effective are they? And so much of that depends on your community And in our area, what it comes back to is we've been very blessed that we have local people that support us on a regular basis. And they donate to the library because their family has always donated to the library. So there again, I think your library is such a reflection of where you live, that to try to make us all be equal or have as many equal services as possible is a really good goal. I think the reality comes back to how much can you afford, how much local support, how good are you in your community. So I guess we all have to remember public service is basically what we do. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. It sounds like you do live in a very good community. And I don't think you'll get any argument from anyone on the commission about state support for what is really basic infrastructure right at this point, right? That the shared catalog that helps coordinate and lift all libraries. Anybody else have questions for Sonia? Okay, thank you, Sonia.
So Nancy Schmidt is the coordinator of South Central.
Hi, this is Nancy Schmidt, and I am the director at the Laurel Public Library. And as Tracy just said, the coordinator for South Central Libraries. We have 18 libraries in our federation, and I pretty close could say both the smallest and the largest libraries in the state. Reiterating what everybody else has said before me, we'd love to see everybody on the shared catalog. The hotspots are a great thing. iPads are kind of iffy around in my area. I'd love to see some improvement to our internet access to a lot of places. And I think, if I'm wrong, there's only about 4 of us that are on the Courier. And I'd love to be able to get the rest of them on there, but it comes down to cost and distances and who can be served where they're at because of the real rural areas. The shared catalog, I have 2 libraries who have emphatically said they will not be on the shared catalog, but we'll see. We're still working on them. We do have 5 new directors in our federation. Just in the last year alone, there's been a lot of retirements out. And it's like, I think with COVID, everybody got fatigued of trying to handle everything. Yes, we've adapted the way we work. We managed to still serve our populations and give them what they felt they needed, but it's been tough. It's been having the turnover has really not helped with a lot of the libraries. And we hate to see that, but at some point when you get tired of it, you get tired of it. One other thing that we also have here is we have a collection of book kits for the Federation, primarily for the Federation, but they go out to everybody. Every library in my Federation has a book club that has borrowed kits out of our Federation sets. And then we also send to other areas around the state. Any questions so far?
Thank you, Nancy. Can you elaborate a little on why the resistance about the 2 libraries that don't want to join the shared catalog?
Well, considering that one of them just had their director retire, we might see a change in that. But she very emphatically said she doesn't want to learn a new way to do this.
That.
Yeah, it comes down to a technology thing. I think with the proper training, and we all do get tired of the changes that happen because technology is not stagnant. So, we just have to learn to deal with it.
No, that's true. We are working in an ever changing world, aren't we?
Yeah.
Those changes are just speeding up.
Exactly. And that's the case with the other director too. She just doesn't really want to move into the shared catalog yet.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Were you finished with your report? I thought I might have cut you off.
No, I think I was finished. It's just basically saying what everybody else has been saying all along. You've given us great opportunities. Our libraries appreciate the funds that you give us. Again, we turn around and write our checks right back to either the shared catalog or OCLC or the courier, whatever we happen to use our money for. It all comes down to about the same thing.
But what is the one big opportunity we have as at the state level to make your lives, collective lives, easier there at South Central?
I'm going to have to say getting more libraries on the courier would be the thing that would serve us best. Or
Okay.
even into the partner sharing group.
Oh, okay. Which and that kind of goes hand in hand, actually, doesn't it?
For the most part, I know I entered the courier before I became a partner library, and it basically does work together that way. I would like to see us all on the partners because there's so much that we can do for one another.
So to make partners sort of ubiquitous, universal as alongside the shared catalog.
Yes. It has really opened up what my patrons can get just being a partner library.
So what's helpful for me to hear this is that sort of you're giving a kind of a credit or a report card to the state library and to the commission saying, so you've been focusing on this, but this is what we really need. In many cases, I think those have aligned nicely, but it's really helpful to hear this because that tells me what to worry about in the future. That's super. Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to put in that I hub for the libraries over by Miles City, and the amount of, if you had a statistic in front of you of the amount of books that went back and forth, I think you would all be amazed.
Mm-hmm.
It's from Nancy's library, we borrow book kits on a regular basis from their federation, and it goes to all the libraries in this area. And things like that can keep your individual costs down, that you can afford to do other things. It's an incredible service. And sometimes you hear a lot of complaints about things are late, and well, right now that's just the status that we're all dealing with. And I know that the transportation company has the same problem that we see. You can't keep employees. Mm-hmm. It's hard to keep your business going. You can be running one day and then somebody comes in and they've got COVID and everybody gets to go home. So sometimes I think we have to just remember the time that we're dealing with right now, and hopefully it will not be a permanent status.
Your lips to God's ears.
I just want to give the commission just a little bit of perspective, and I know I see Robin has her hand raised too. When Sonia talks about the volume of materials shared amongst libraries, there's been a recent survey of other state libraries that support these couriers, and libraries have been sharing information about the volume of materials that we move. And I was shocked, and I think Amy Stillheron could provide me the number, but it was somewhere around 600,000-ish a year items. That is more than the states of North Carolina and the states of Florida sharing materials. So that to me is just astounding.
That number is correct, Jenny.
Right.
Over 500,000 items in a year.
Just my little library alone loans out over 800 items a month, not counting the book kits.
We've also, and Dylan, have run into the problem of the courier stopping, and I don't know if they're like busy or they forget us or whatever. And we do have a couple people that travel between here and Madison County for work, and so we're able to call them and see at least if we can get them to drop off books for us at certain libraries on their way home. So that's been really helpful. But if we could and we send out a ton of books, and I did do, when I first started, I did check to see if the courier was cheaper than sending them through the mail, just with our books and how much we went out. And there was a huge significance in having the courier, but the consistency, again, like Sonia said, you know, do they get new employees all the time? Do they not really know where to stop? Are they sick with COVID or some other illness to where they're not working and running this week? And so it's kind of more inconsistent.
And we up here along the High Line have tried.
Did we lose you?
Yeah, you kind of went out there, Valerie.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Along the High Line, we have tried to get a courier service going, and it just hasn't worked. Of course, we haven't done anything courier wise for the last couple of years. And I don't know, it worked okay for me, but it didn't seem to work for the other libraries along here. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. There seems to be a fair amount of resistance to it as well. And I'm not really sure why that is, but it's a problem getting, someone to do that and being able to have a steady delivery service.
I think that a part of that is also when you look at small libraries, how many hours they're open, what they have for staff, whether or not they're willing to do it. Because we have like Prairie County, and of course, Rolane, who's the director, is also the mayor of Terry and runs a postal route along with being the librarian. And yet for her, it has been incredibly valuable that she is a part of the Partners program. And at the end of her mail route, she always comes to town once a week to do her grocery shopping. And that's the day she brings her crate of books in for us to put in to share with everyone. And sometimes I just think it's the attitude of the person working and whether or not they want that for their community and if they're able to do it, which each community is going to be different. But as many people who can join or be a part of it, we would welcome.
And I do think that you hit the nail on the head there with the like the hours that people are available. That was the one thing that we ran into a problem with. So, that's definitely an issue.
All right.
Thank you. Tracy, do we have one more?
We do. Thank you, Nancy. And so the last person is Abby Dooley from the Tamarack Federation.
Abby, are you with us?
If you are talking, Abby, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, somehow I pushed the button on my microphone. Yes, I'm Abby Dooley. I'm from the North Lake County Public Library up in Polson. I'm the new Tamarack Federation coordinator. So last fall, we did see the reopening of many of the libraries in our federation after we were closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We were fortunate enough to be able to hold our spring federation meeting and retreat in person at the new Missoula Public Library. And we also had an online component for those who were uncomfortable or unable to attend in Missoula. Much of our discussion, as well as our joys and concerns, centered around the effects that COVID-19 has had on our libraries. While working through temporary closures, reductions in hours and services, and loss of personnel, our libraries were innovators, looking for and implementing solutions to ensure our patrons were still able to access what they needed from their library. Curbside pickup, mobile Wi-Fi hotspots, outdoor story times, and increasing access to digital resources were just some of the solutions offered by our libraries. During our spring 2021 meeting, we were fortunate to offer trainings to the attendees, something that we hadn't been able to do for a year. One of the trainings was a 3-hour workshop conducted by the University of Montana's Center for Children, Families, and Workforce Development. This training focused on essential leadership skills and strategies to build safe and effective teams during the pandemic and beyond. Turnover has certainly been a challenge for our Tamarack libraries this past year, whether for health reasons, family changes, or just burnout. Libraries did struggle with keeping and hiring personnel this year. Connie Behe, for directors, Connie Behe left ImagineIF for a new library position in Washington State. Lynn Kirsten retired from the Thompson Falls Public Library, and Christine Shelton just recently resigned from the Plains Public Library. And Honor Bray, who had been the longtime Tamarack Federation coordinator for many years and is the director of the Missoula Public Library, is retiring at the end of this year. We had many positive things happen this year as well, though, including the new Missoula Public Library opening its doors to the public. And then Bitterroot Public Library was able to pass a mill levy. We did give our remaining Tamarack funds to the Montana Library to Go group to purchase more digital books, because that certainly saw an uptick during the pandemic closure. For us, Western Montana has seen a boom in new individuals and families moving into our communities, and many of those are from out of state. This may pose a challenge for our libraries in providing services to these new residents with our existing and aging facilities and our limited budgets. It also offers a great opportunity for us to bring more people into our libraries for programming. Technology, whether for staff or the public, is a huge part of every library. And we are expected to provide fast internet, updated computers, and incorporate tablets, laptops, and Wi-Fi hotspots for checkout. IT is such a specialized field and one that not every library can afford or even find somebody to do it. And many libraries are having difficulty finding qualified IT contractors in their area or employees who can take on that role. So if there was ever an opportunity to obtain more money for our federation, we might be able to work together with one company that could work remotely and serve all of our libraries. We will have our fall meeting next week and talk some more. And our plan right now is to have our spring retreat again in Missoula in person in May. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I guess I have the same question. What do you need from us? What's the biggest opportunity we have of working together to help you?
IT support.
Yes, I think for us, IT support is a big thing. Most of our money was spent on either electronic resources or technology. And then the rest, another big chunk was again on the Montana Shared Catalog, OCLC contract, things like that, that so many are part of. And I think of the 14 libraries that are in our federation, I believe there are 4 that are not part of the Montana Shared Catalog and partners. And most of the Western Montana libraries are part of partners. And it's unfortunate that we have a couple that are on the highway that gets driven every single day between Missoula and Kalispell that has courier service. It's unfortunate that they are not able to be part of that and share with libraries across the state.
And Abby, when you say IT issues, do you mean desktop support or help with enterprise applications? What is it?
So, a lot of it is, servers and updating the PCs, updating tablets. There's specialized software that we have for running public sessions for people. Printing is a big thing, and it's one of those things that a lot of the librarians don't have that special knowledge. I know, for me personally, I know just enough to get by, but if something really broke with our server or even with one of the printers, I have to bring somebody in from outside. And we have been fortunate. We have found an individual who is able to help us, but it's expensive. We tried an employee that could help, and that didn't work out very well. And so we're just kind of in that spot where, you know, trying to pay for that and keep it updated is so important. But trying to pay for it is tricky because, you know, of course, we are trying to avoid viruses on our computers, any kind of infiltration like that. But also just, I mean, when we had to update to Windows 10, you know, that took somebody that had the time and the expertise to be able to do that. And it's a little tricky.
Any other questions for Abby? All right. Thanks very much for your report.
Thanks, Abby. Nicely done. So the action item I have for the commission is a request to approve the annual report as it is linked in your agenda. Just to briefly explain some of the differences between spent and the amount awarded, as we did have a couple of libraries who were unable to expend all their funds due to COVID. And then we had a library who couldn't spend their funds because they never received them. The state never released them. So that is the majority of the difference between the amount spent and the amount awarded. Do you have any questions for me?
What happens to the unexpended monies, Tracy?
I strongly encourage the libraries to spend them immediately and then report back next year.
But if some of the libraries can't spend them because they haven't received them or they're not.
Yeah, so the state of Montana will eventually release the funds, I hope, knock on wood.
Okay.
Yeah, we have had the situation where the library's funds are withheld, usually actually because of something going on at the city or county level, not the library, but they've always received them. This is the first time that the county didn't meet the Department of Administration's requirements, and so the library was unable to receive their funds.
And is there a deadline by when they need to spend them?
We asked them to spend the funds by June 30th.
The next June 30th or the past June?
Yeah. So this report that you're looking at, the libraries were asked to spend their funds by June 30th, 2021.
Okay. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the Federation report?
Yes, I make a motion to approve the Federation report.
Thank you, Kristen.
I second.
Thank you, Bruce. Any further discussion? Any questions?
I'd just like to say that this is a terrific format for the Federation reports. Great summary here that we're looking at on the screen now, but way better even is the conversation we were able to have with the individual coordinators about what's going on, and that really helpful. So super duper. Thank you, everyone.
I agree. Thank you, Bruce. Any other comments, questions? Any public comment? Okay, then all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Okay, Jenny, now we're moving into the State Library report.
Thanks, Kenny. Just to briefly follow up on the Federation coordinators reports, Tracy met with them last week. They always like to come together and reflect on their experiences as Federation coordinators and the work that they lead with the federations. We think it's time to begin to look at the role the federations play and how we can make sure that we are maximizing their work. You know, as you've heard, their focus is really regional, and they share a lot of regional similarities. If you look at the makeup of regions in other states, some of the kinds of programs that we talk a lot about, like our shared catalog and support for broadband and a courier are services that are handled within a region of a state. Montana, as you've heard, really rolled out these kinds of programs statewide. And to the extent that our resources allow, that's the model that we continue to try to support. And so in some ways, the role of our federations here in Montana are different than what we see in other states, and probably different from how they were originally envisioned when statute was passed that created these kinds of federations. And so we think it's appropriate to spend some time working with the federation coordinators, the libraries, and all of you to help us understand how we might maximize the role. Really, what is the contribution of the federations and their regional work that can really maximize their impact? And so that's something that we're going to start talking about over the next several months. I plan to bring a larger discussion, at least to start the conversation, to your February commission meeting. And we look forward to having that conversation with you and with all of them. I also really appreciate the great conversations about the opportunities that we have going forward. Certainly funding is a huge need to address a lot of the challenges that the coordinators brought forward. I really hope that we can work closely with the Montana Library Association as we start to think about the 2023 legislative session and the legislative agenda. So, the State Library and the Montana Library Association can really speak in one voice about the kinds of state priorities we might want to request. The other thing I wanted to just bring to the attention of the commission is the Build America's Libraries Act. That's a piece of federal legislation. It's been discussed as a piece of standalone legislation. It's also been discussed as part of both the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill that are being discussed in Congress. That funding would direct federal dollars for library infrastructure through state libraries. The intent is to create a grant-funded program to support library construction and renovation. Several states have state dollars that go to support construction and renovation. Montana does not. We haven't had any funding to support library construction since, as you heard from Bill Wilson, the Library Services and Construction Act was changed to the Library Services and Technology Act funds. So that is something that I think it bears keeping in mind. I've mentioned that at federation meetings when library board members have talked about the challenges that they see in their buildings. And, if it may be something that would be appropriate for this commission to advocate for, perhaps sending letters to our congressional delegation to support, for example. So I wanted to bring that information to your attention as well. I'm going to move on into my report. You have a number of links within your agenda. The first is to the fiscal 21 annual report, and I hope you'll take the time to review our accomplishments in the last year. Just some highlights that I wanted to make. You've heard us talk about our legislative successes that we experienced, and really that was such a wonderful opportunity, and we really look forward to advancing the work that the legislature has charged us with. I want to acknowledge the federal indirect rate that Melissa and her team worked so hard to put in place. We're already seeing the benefits of having that additional funds to help support the central services and other indirect costs that go in to support these programs. It's really allowing us to continue to increase our capacity. We accomplished the integration of the Montana Heritage Program staff into the state library. We have one more person that we'll be hiring at the end of this year. That's the botany position, but all of the other positions that we had targeted, including the coordinator, the GIS and research staff, as well as the zoology staff, are now fully employees of the state library. You've heard just an immense amount of information about the state library's COVID response. Not only things like the hotspot lending program and our work to continue to support the internal networks in libraries, but just all of the personal touches that our staff made working with different communities and libraries and people impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, including hosting regular drop-in sessions that allowed librarians to come together and share their experiences. The shared catalog rolled out a new mobile app. So despite everything that was going on, we were still able to take advantage of new technologies and roll them out to our communities. And I've heard nothing but positive feedback about their effort to roll out that mobile app. So again, I encourage you to take time to explore the accomplishments in this last year. It's truly remarkable how our staff continue to step up on a daily basis, even in light of the pandemic that we still wrestle with. You have our 2022 work plan dashboard available to you, and we'll continue to update that dashboard so you have a sense of the ongoing work of the agency. And then I'm excited to share with you two different reports, both of which were prepared for our interim budget committee. I've mentioned in previous meetings that the legislature passed a bill that creates new interim budget committees that will meet throughout the legislative interim. Those committees are essentially our budget committees that we work with through a legislative session. And so having them meet more regularly gives us the opportunity to continue to engage with them on a regular basis. Their reviewing reports from the agencies, tracking our financial expenditures. They're looking at legislation that was passed during the session and how that legislation is being enacted. And they're also looking at our COVID-related funding and how we're making those expenditures. So we were asked to prepare information about our goals and objectives and metrics for tracking the impact of that work. And that information is expressed in the two different story maps that our staff have prepared. The one story map, the interim budget committee report, pertains to the passage of House Bills 49 and 50 and the one-time only appropriation of funds for the real-time network. And you can see as you go through those reports, the various goals and objectives for each of those programs and the metrics that we intend to continue to report on throughout the interim. Our intent is to create more interactive interfaces for the data that lends itself to that kind of format. So some dashboards and that kind of information, so that through each of these quarterly budget committee hearings, the legislature and you will have a chance to see the reporting and the impact of the work. And then similarly with the COVID related funds, what's included in the report is the expenditures of our previous both state dollars as well as the CARES Act dollars, and now moving into the ARPA funds that we're just starting to spend. And again, you'll see information about the programs that those monies are supporting, as well as the metrics in the future, the impacts that those dollars are having. So I'm really excited about both the work that's underway, as well as our ability to report this information in a very interactive way. I'll share with the commission that when we reviewed these story maps with the interim budget committee at their September 15th meeting, they said that they hoped that these story maps could be a model for other agencies in their reporting to the budget committees. So we're pleased with how that process has launched, and I think it's just going to be a tremendous opportunity for us to continue to work with the legislators ahead of the next legislative session. Stop and ask if there's any questions there.
Jenny, I'll just comment that I'm a big fan of these story maps. I mean, they really make the reporting come alive, and I really enjoy seeing these and reading them, and I'm glad you're getting that same response from other sectors as well.
Thanks, Kenny. I wanted to update you on the appointment for the Land Information Advisory Council and how that's impacting the land plan process for this year. For the new commissioners, the Montana Land Information Advisory Council, it's about 21 members, so it's a very large council, and they are responsible for helping us set our goals and priorities for the development of GIS data and information, and to help administer a grant program that awards grant funds to support those goals and objectives. And we articulate those goals through an annual land plan that's prepared and recommended by that council to you as the commission. One of the challenges of this council is that the entire council turns over every 2 years. That's the way the statute is written. And so it really sort of creates a hiatus in our work. We're actually talking to the Lieutenant Governor about updating that legislation to create staggered terms. And she has expressed a strong willingness to support that kind of work. And I think it would allow us to have more continuity in our work. Of the 21 members, we have 9 new council members that were appointed in late September. We still have a couple of seats open that we're waiting to get appointed. So about half of the council is new as of the end of September. We have met with them, we've done an orientation with them, and we held a work session this last Friday reviewing the current land plan. And just a reminder, with the addition of the funds that we received in the legislative session, the previous council reviewed and updated that land plan just this past April. So the land plan itself is only about 6 months old, 7 months old. And so at this point, given the fact that we have a current land plan and a brand new council, we think it's appropriate to make some minor tweaks to that land plan and then go through the public comment period that will launch here in at the end of October. But we don't anticipate making any major changes to what will be the FY23 land plan, which will ultimately be brought to the commission at your December commission meeting. Any questions about that process? I should have put a link in the agenda to the new council, but in a similar location to your commission page is a MLIAC council page, and you can see who those members are. Wanted to share with you an update on the Montana Shared Catalog request for proposal. We've talked a lot today about the impact of the Montana Shared Catalog and the almost 190 libraries that it now serves. The state of Montana requires us to go out for bid on those kinds of contracts every 10 years. And so we are at that point in time when we need to go through that process. And staff, John Kilgour and Amy Marchwick, have been working very hard to pull together the RFP documents, and we'll be working with the state of Montana Procurement Division to issue that request for proposal. We hope that that will happen here in the next week or so. Given the timing of the RFP, we plan to be negotiating a contract in late December, which is when we would typically open up a round of applications for new members to the Montana Shared Catalog. So if we are in negotiations with a new vendor, that would mean we would spend the spring migrating to a new system. And in that eventuality, we would not open up an application process. We would then wait until later in the year when we fully migrated to a new system and we could bring libraries onto a new system. If the result of the RFP is that we stay with the existing vendor, Cersei Dynex, we would then have the opportunity to open up an application period. It may be a little bit delayed just depending on the timing of the RFP, but I wanted to make you aware of that possibility.
I have a question about the this last bullet item. Speaking very, very generally, what does the market look like? Are there lots of alternative prospective vendors, or is it fairly limited?
We did run a request for information this last year, and so we did get some responses to that. It's a pretty limited market. I would ask either Amy or Kara if they wanted to share their perspectives from that request for information.
I can speak to that, Jenny. This is Amy Martwick. We did have responses from the major ILS, the integrated library system vendors, and for the RFI, as Jenny said, and we reviewed those, and it's a fairly specialized type of technology. So there's not as many of those sort of vendors as there are in some other fields, but we did get 6 or 7 responses that were from the major vendors, and it does look like in terms of being able to run our system on them, there's more than one strong contender that could fulfill our needs. So we will at least have some variety to look at.
That's helpful. Is the state's requirement to review these RFPs or these awards every decade a problem, or is this a good thing?
I would consider it a good schedule to do your due diligence. There have been a lot of changes in ILS systems in the last 10 years. So it's a good opportunity for us to really make the concerted effort to look at everything that's out there and see if there's something that might suit us better, and it gives us the opportunity to renegotiate our contract if we ended up staying with the current vendor, which is sometimes nice.
And thank you. And finally, the members of the shared catalog, are they fairly sanguine about this process, or is there a lot of concern?
The feedback I've received has been that they're fairly sanguine. We've solicited from the members to try to get some of them involved in the RFP review process, so that we do have representation from the libraries as we go through these responses that we'll be getting. And we've had people respond to them, but I have had no emails, bewailing the process or anything. And we have some libraries that are just in conversations with the consultants or with us on the phone. The process itself does not seem to be concerning to anyone, the RFP process. We have some libraries that would be very excited to go to a new vendor, and some libraries just to have a change, and some libraries that have some trepidation about if we needed to change. So I think where there's any sort of anxiety is just about any change management itself, not about the RFP and looking for a new vendor and possibly negotiating. So.
Great.
Bruce, are you implying that the migration process might not be fun?
Oh, well, heavens. I'm sure it'll be fraught with various anxieties, but I was trying to get a sense for if this is a comfortable process or if it's a really uncomfortable process. And it sounds like we're doing a super job and doing what we need to do, and it'll go forward, and we'll all cross our fingers and hope for the best.
I am glad to hear that. Sorry, I am glad to hear that there were several responses, and that there's at least more than one strong contender. I mean, the market has been shrinking a lot over the last couple of decades. I mean, Cersei Dynex used to be two different companies that merged. Ex Libris acquired Endeavor many years ago, and more recently acquired III, Innovative Interfaces. So the market has shrunk quite a lot.
Any other questions about the RFP? Certainly share an update with you in December on where we are in the process. Just a couple of other quick updates for you. We started in August doing what we're calling staff drop-in sessions. They're once a month, and they're intended to be sort of just timely little updates from staff to their colleagues at the state library. The intent behind them is to share current information that other staff might not be aware of or familiar with, to continue to try to ensure collegiality, especially with some of our remote staff, and to make staff aware of ongoings of the state library that they might not otherwise be familiar with. So they're not formal, they're not professional presentations in any way, they're not designed to be trainings, they're really just designed to be sort of updates and timely information amongst colleagues. We are going to post these, they are recorded, we do them via Zoom, and they are recorded. And so we would like to host them on our new Moodle platform in a channel that's just for you as commissioners. Normally we would open them up for you to attend, but we don't want to run afoul of public meeting laws if we end up in a quorum in one of these sessions. And so we think the best solution is to make these recordings available for you to listen to at your leisure. They run anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. We've done one now on the Natural Heritage Program, and Tracy did one at the end of September on the newly adopted public library standards. October is going to be on the new Montana Memory Project interface. So I think it's a good way for the commission to keep abreast of our work, to learn more about the ongoings of our work at your own pace. So Genevieve is going to share information with you about how you can log into this commission channel. It'll have information about creating a login and password. So look for that information from her. And then you're also going to see more communication from us in the form of online newsletters. The service is called Gov Delivery. And it's from a company called Granicus. And Genevieve is taking the lead in helping us be more proactive in our public communications. Everything from news and announcements to press releases, requests for public comment, etc., will go out via this new communication channel. If you've paid attention at all to the announcements that come from the Montana Memory Project on a weekly basis, it's the exact same tool and technology. For other members of the public, people will be able to pick and choose topics that they might be interested in, from the Montana Memory Project to our GIS services to library development work, etc. So Genevieve is going to subscribe you to those channels, and then you'll have the ability to read them or select what topical areas you might be interested in to opt out of various services. And you'll also see similar services that are offered by other state agencies that you can choose to access or not. So look for that information from Genevieve as well. Are there any questions for me?
Questions? Thank you, Jenny, for a great report. We're now moving into commission goals and objectives and the calendar review. And I see Genevieve is about to click. There we go. Any questions about the calendar? I noticed that the commission meeting for December is scheduled for the 8th, and I thought we had moved that to the following week, to the 15th. 15th, 14th, 15th.
Oh, sorry about that. I will fix that right now.
And are we, is the question coming up again about whether we're still planning to hold that meeting online or in person? That is a question.
I think so. Yes.
What's the feeling of the commissioners?
This is Elsie. Thanks, Kenny. I believe it's about the work that needs to be on the agenda as much as it is us rejoicing to be in person. So if we can have a view of what the work might be, that might tell us in person or in virtual.
This is Bruce. My sense is from a public health point of view that we'll still likely be in the soup. Unfortunately.
We never know about the weather either. Sorry, but you just never know.
I agree with Robin that probably with combination of weather, unpredictability, and then especially December 15th, and then the COVID rates right now, maybe not the best meeting to plan for in person. Maybe we aim for February or April, maybe.
I really appreciate the sort of the rational approach that I think I think we all agree and understand that when possible, we would love to meet face to face, but being watchful and monitoring the levels of the outbreak around the state is kind of forming our decision. And as long as we do that, I think it's great. And I presume that there will always still be the option for people who feel too uncomfortable to attend virtually. So I think that's about as good as we can hope for, given the uncertain nature of the future. Personally.
Okay. Anybody else? Peggy?
No, I agree. It all depends on the weather and such. Just to back up just a half a minute though, we do have the orientation set though for the 2nd. That's in person, correct?
That's right, Peggy. And for the other commissioners, that's a new commissioner orientation for Peggy that we have scheduled. So there's not an expectation that everyone will attend.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we'll plan to hold the December 15 meeting online. Okay. Any other calendar issues that we need to deal with?
Not an issue. I think we've got attendance for the remaining Federation meetings in place. Just something I wanted to bring to your attention. Typically, the commission meets at the Montana Library Association in late March or April, depending on when that conference is scheduled. They are not holding their regular spring conference this year. They're holding a joint conference with the Mountain Plains Library Association and the Pacific Northwest Library Association in August 3rd through 6th. So we may want to think about, when we look at your calendar for 2022, holding the commission meeting during that conference in August, but also for our meeting planning for FY22, there will not be a need for us to try to coordinate our April meeting with that conference. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And then it's time to start thinking about my evaluation. And for new commissioners, last year we went through a process where the commission and I developed some goals and objectives for me and identified my work as well as some opportunities for commission engagement. So what I would suggest is that I prepare an update and response to that document. Last year, we met as a subcommittee with the commission, and so the commission may want to appoint a subcommittee again to work with me on that evaluation. And then we typically will meet as an entire commission in executive session to review that final evaluation.
That would be in December, Jenny?
Right.
Okay. Anything else with regard to goals and objectives? Then I'll ask for any public comment on anything that was not contained in this agenda. My accessibility librarian tells me I should wait 10 seconds for responses. Okay. Any other business or announcements?
Thank you for the good meeting.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks for being here and for participating. And for the State Library continuing its amazing work. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.